2 on the 13th of January. As the chair of the Norwich Select Board, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by Governor Scott as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and pursuant to Addendum 6 to Executive Order 01-20 and Act 92, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. In accordance with Act 92, there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting. However, in accordance with the temporary amendments to the open meeting law, I confirm that we are providing public access via Zoom. All members of the board have the ability to communicate contemporaneously to this meeting. The public will be invited to speak. I ask if the public chooses to speak, they state their name and locatable address. All votes will be roll call. And in a minute, Roger will describe how to notify the board that you want to speak. So having said that, I am calling the select board meeting for the 13th of January to order at 6:34.
So to participate via Zoom, go under reactions and there'll be an option to raise your hand. If you're on phone, push star 9, that'll signal to me to alert Claudette that you'd like to make a comment. And then once recognized, push star 6 to unmute yourself.
Okay, so first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Any board members or town manager have any issues they want to pull, reorder? Yeah, Herb.
Just more logistics, that when you're talking about the warning and all that, since you have your Monday meeting, you should be approving the warning on Monday night rather than tonight. But if there are any articles that you as a board want to talk about, I'd focus on that. That way that will limit your discussion on Monday.
Okay, thank you. And moving now to public and select board comments. Any members of the public wanting to make a comment on items not pertaining to the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to the appointment to the Rec Council. Is there a motion to appoint Nina Sablin, and I hope I'm correctly pronouncing her name.
Join the meeting.
As the Norwich Rec Council junior member?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Mary, seconded by Rob, to appoint Nina to the Norwich Rec Council as the junior member. I don't see her as a participant, so don't know if Bree wants to speak to this appointment.
I'm happy to say that in other capacities. Oh no, Bree, you're here. Go ahead.
Sorry,
I'm
sorry, Roger.
No,
I was muted. I had a little bit of a problem logging in. Nina might too, unfortunately. But so Nina is wonderful. Obviously, she's worked with us on the Youth Advisory Council. She worked with Roger. She's one of the most responsible teams I've had the honor of working with. So I highly support her being part of the Norwich Rec Advisory Council as a junior member.
Thank you, Bree.
Yep.
Any select board questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll roll call. Mary, how do you vote?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And Claudette's a yes. So that's 5 yes. Next item is the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second. John.
Motion made by Mary, seconded by John. Anything anyone wants to pull? Seeing none.
I couldn't tell if, sorry, the air quality study, will that be part of the town manager's report or is that part of the consent agenda?
I just thought it was part of correspondence, but Herb, are you going to?
I put it in correspondence and I can talk about it during the town manager report should you
Okay.
choose to, especially if you have questions.
Okay, so I won't mention it now. Okay, great, thanks.
Any other questions from the board? Seeing none, we'll roll call. Mary,
Yes,
Roger,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and Claudette's a yes. Moving on then to the finance office proposal. Herb, I'm gonna send this your way.
Thank you. I'm not seeing Lauren here, but there is an individual from the temp agency that's supposed to attend tonight's meeting. I just resent her the link, so hopefully she didn't forget. But the bottom line is that we've gone through 5 advertising, hiring, whatever you want to call it, interview processes, tried to offer the position a number of times to some individuals for various reasons, usually differing reasons. I haven't been able to secure a finance director as of yet. Based on a past meeting, I had sought some assistance from the board with a level of agreement to have me and Mary and Roger have some discussion, essentially trying to just corral how we can get somewhere going forward. My concern about going forward with a 6th advertising campaign so shortly after the most recent 2 would be that the impression that there might be the appearance of damaged goods for Norwich. And so where I've turned from that standpoint is to look at 2 other possible options. One you've heard before, which is not your favorite one, which is not my favorite either, which is to outsource with Batchelder Associates. Our 3-year contract has ended with them. So if you don't move forward with her again, either in a sole source for another year or go out or ask her to provide another contract that you're willing to move with, which you could do under your purchasing policy, then you need to go out to bid again for an auditor. Though she's not under contract, that's a possibility for a short-term solution. The cost of that, the last that I checked in, was about the same that the more expensive cost for the 2 CV that you have for the other option for tonight, which is the second option being going with a temp agency. I have reached out to the agency that we were able to find Becky through. They have a sister organization that deals with the higher level finance type of folks. So the person, Lauren, that I was hoping would be here tonight to talk about both individuals is not here at this point, but I had forwarded to you confidentially at this point the CV for the 2 individuals that she's recommending. One of the 2. One is much more expensive than the other. The more expensive one is sort of your true, really high level CPA type of individual. The other one is what I would call somewhere between probably Becky and a full online financial director type of thing. But that person is a local person that would be able to physically sit in the office to do work. The other one would be a remote person. So there are pros and cons to that. What I was trying to do tonight was essentially bring that proposal forward to you. And some of this relate in talking to Mary and Roger. I think to a degree they agreed that doing another immediate advertisement might not be in the best interest of Norwich. So that's why I'm bringing forward to you the possibility of a temporary situation. I think the way the rates are currently set out, and based on at least the most recent monthly report, which is through November. The December one will come out for your next meeting. That we probably have about, if we have probably about 3 months to 3 2/3 months time that someone could sit in a chair every single day, 40 hours a week sort of thing. Or, you know, I think we can space that out so that that whomever we put in there could at least bridge the balance of this particular fiscal year and get us into, you know, year-end type stuff while we, what I would say is buy a little time to being able to get out to put another advertisement out there. So is that, I guess I would say right there, are there questions at this point that people have? Yeah.
Well,
John?
well,
Sorry, Roger. John had his hand up. Go ahead, John.
So yeah, I'd just like to hear very clearly, how many hours are you proposing for this position so that we can consider the cost, which is way more on a dollars per hour basis than we would be expecting to pay. So how many hours are you proposing?
Yeah, so what I'm proposing is to do a contract that does not exceed $50,000. We have about 61,000 in the current director's line item remaining. So the 50,000, sorry, I'm figuring out the other half of the math, so.
Herb, I was interrupting before because you laid this out earlier, and I don't know if you want to just say it's anywhere from 680 to 800 hours.
Right.
Okay.
Sorry, thank you.
It's okay. Yeah.
I was just trying to do it based on what I had done those figures based on the total sum of dollars for the finance director, but I'm recommending to the board at a $50,000 level because in anticipation that once Becky gives me the December numbers, I probably have less than the 61. And then, so the idea again is to spread those remaining hours out over the course of the remaining fiscal year. So there's basically 3 to 3 2/3 full-time capacity left in that billing. What I would like to be able to do is spread that out for the balance of the year. So February, March, April, May, June. So I would like to spread 3 months across 5 months. So that's going to put you in a situation, John, of you know, half time to 2/3 time each week with that person.
Okay, thanks.
Mary?
I like the idea of the person who could actually be in the office just as a placeholder for the time being.
I think if Lauren was here, I think she would be also saying, because a question I had for her is, of those individuals, you know, is there one of those two individuals, would they be a natural fit potentially? You know, obviously you have to experience the people, but would one of them make a logical, natural connection to becoming the finance director, just like Becky did as a temporary? The less expensive one is the one that Lauren would focus on as the potential to serve that role. And if you asked me today, which one would I choose? I would love to have the high-end CPA to come in for a month and just give you guys everything you need to have and set up whatever. But I think if we're going to bridge the interim with the future, I think the latter candidate probably serves that purpose better. One, because he's local. I think that's going to serve our office much better, having a live body there rather than just a remote situation. It's going to do a better job of doing the checks and balances that are necessary in that office. And I think that person may be the one, if again, assuming success, could be the one that ultimately becomes a finance director type or a full-time staffer working toward becoming a finance director.
Roger?
Herb, I also, in our conversations, you talked about distinguishing between the NEMRIC bulk time agreement, which we've already approved, which has a sticker, attached to it, right? And then also this position. So, I think this is a robust plan that you're putting together, right? It's like there's 3 roles now. And so can you talk a little bit about how this is different or complementary to the bulk time agreement with Nemrick? And because this temp situation is meant to take on some of these finance director duties temporarily, while you're seeing the Nemrick bulk time agreement for that ongoing, to tap into that ongoing training that is needed to continue to stabilize this office. So is that right? And can you just talk a little bit about that? Because
Yeah, so I think in the trilogy of what we're talking about, you have Becky that conducts her role basically as a day-to-day, dealing with accounts receivable, accounts payable, payroll. There's some overlap in terms of the checks and balances that need to occur, but she basically, think of her as the day-to-day, but doing a lot of the grunt work related stuff as it pertains to the finance. The temp would be dealing with the higher level stuff, which is trying to really focus in on the monthly reports, the other form of reporting that I and you as a board are looking for, to deal with year-end related stuff, to deal with the creation of my sanction protocols and procedures that I really need to be getting into. I also see that person being one that can help me work with you folks with regard to any amendments to policies financially that you're looking to deal with. And then Nemrick comes in as sort of the expert of the system, the Nemrick system. There's still work that they're training Becky on with regard to things. So obviously a temp coming in is going to need some level of understanding and working the Nemrick system. But the bulk time arrangement does not limit our use of them to just finance. It's an overall payment that we're making for all kinds of stuff. So as for instance, with the lister's office in the middle of trying to hire a new assistant for them since Misaki moved to DPW, that person and all of their training can come under that bulk time arrangement, and as well including the town clerk's office that uses some of the Nemrick modules. So there's utility continuing and expanding with regard to that Nemrick role that still remains critical to the town and its operations. The nice thing is, by bringing, with the temp coming in and trying to lock down some of this financial stuff for that office, it potentially allows, we're using less and less time of Nemrick as Becky's becoming more up to speed, but some of it would still be used for that office. But the ability to spread that to, for instance, the lister's office and to any updates for the town clerk, that plays in as well. So the length of time of the contract may go a little bit longer because we basically have it until we run out of the money type of stuff. So we may have the service longer than what we might normally have been dealing with, and or the situation where we can spread the value of the bulk time arrangement to other departments.
Any question, Rob?
Yeah, I was wondering, what does that do with the in the finance office? How would the seniority come into effect? Is with this new person with somewhat more experience, perhaps a higher level of experience, be responsible for overseeing Becky, or is that entirely in your ballpark?
That remains in my ballpark, because the individual coming in would be a temp and would not technically be an employee of the town. So they would not have supervisory role over Becky. I see them working more in tandem with each other, where Becky's doing, again, more of the day-to-day work, and this person's going to function more to deal with a higher level related stuff that needs to get done. I've been essentially trying to serve de facto as finance director since Roberta left from that standpoint. And as you all are well aware, that just can't happen for an extended period of time. There are things that we've been able to do, and I think we've been able to do it very well. I think Bonnie Batchelder identified that with the presentation of the audit, but she also was very clear in saying that's not a sustainable situation. And frankly, I don't want to be in that position anymore. I can't do the things I'm supposed to do as a town manager when I'm having to spend some time downstairs trying to do stuff in tandem with Becky. And I know that there are other individuals like Cheryl that are offering her help as necessary, but this is just not sustainable. And we're getting to the point where, despite the fact that we're unsuccessful in getting a candidate through 5 advertising campaigns, something has to give. And I think what needs to give is to hold off on advertising for a while, get somebody in there that can, yes, will require some level of training and bringing up to speed, but can focus on the things that office needs to focus on, which will allow me, yeah, I'll have to have some overlap and supervisory role between the two. The hope is that it will also add to relieving me of some of the burden that I've been under for over a year. And keeping in mind that we've been without a checks and balances system since the beginning of 2019, when our former finance assistant walked away from the job. So Roberta served for it was almost 6 months alone herself. And then we very shortly had another person in there. And since then, we've just had Becky with some oversight with folks, but really not what I would call an ideal environment of maintaining checks and balances.
So if I can ask another,
Sure.
This person, if we commit to $50,000 with the agency, are we committing specifically to one individual for that period, for that amount of money?
Yeah.
In other words, if we start out with the lower level person and we decide that maybe we need something a little bit more, somebody with better knowledge of the principles of municipal finance,
yeah,
can we switch to that person?
Right. We would be under contract to essentially amend that contract. We would have to mutually agree with that, with attempt to say if one individual isn't quite doing the stuff and we really need to shift to that higher CPA level or vice versa. Yes, we can make those shifts, but basically what we're trying to do is not have to make those changes. We're trying to find the right fit now without having to shift again. Well, hopefully it doesn't come to that, because that just adds complexity to the issue if we run into that. But it's clearly a possibility.
Any other board questions? Herb, have you talked to either one of these two people?
No, the original arrangement, we had a different candidate that was going to be here tonight to be able to answer some of your questions. But now that we have that person moved on to a different position. And so Lauren has worked with me to identify 2 additional people. And my original thinking was in having somebody here it would be, I think, fairly awkward to have 2 people here in the same temp agency, kind of, lack of a better term, battling for the position. It seemed too awkward. So I asked Lauren instead to be here to be able to talk about both and what it would be. She and I have had a number of conversations on the phone and traded emails. Again, I apologize for her not being here, but I think I generally summarized where she was headed in terms of, if you were to ask her what would be the recommendation for one. I think she's leaning us toward the local person, but she also the idea here is, and I know that you folks are looking to, get the feet wet right away, get some stuff in here, get some things done. And so, clearly that CPA guy at a very high level, can provide that. I mean, he's probably way overqualified for the particular position, but it would give you, probably some immediate results. I think the other gentleman will give you immediate results as well. He's just not at as high of a level. And I think the hourly rates for each, and the hourly rates that are presented in the email that I forwarded to you are the rates that the temp agency charges. It's not just the rate of the individual coming in. So sorry, that's the contractual hourly rate. But you can see the difference in those hourly rates to get a sense of the quality, for lack of a better term, of the qualifications of each.
Any other questions? John?
I don't really have a question so much a comment, but I mean, I think that the opportunity this presents is looking at whether this is a role that we could fill part-time. I've advocated on several occasions that I think this might be something that if you had a high quality candidate, they could take care of this in 15 or 20 hours a week for a small town like us. It's nothing like the large organizations that lots of people are CFOs of. And so if we could spend more money per hour and still be at or below our full-time budget, we may find that we've got a lot more candidates than we would have at the full-time position at the lower dollar rate. So, you know, I'm interested in this in that respect.
And coincidentally, this is kind of what I recommended way back when, was a full-time assistant and a part-time director. No, but I understand what Langus is saying. I mean, it's really getting the high quality aspect of things is the key. And I get that.
I think I saw Roger and then Rob.
I mean, I was going to say that it's not really quite like what was originally recommended. I think what, you know, and I benefited from like Mary and I benefited from having some collaborative conversations and some exchanges, which I encourage you to put into a memo, you know, for a future packet, because I think what's different about this is a narrative and a vision for this department a little bit more than previous. Like there's an ongoing training mechanism. There's an A-line person who's done a little bit of work with us prior already in there, serving the everyday functions. And then you now have this two qualified candidates to bring in and start doing some of the financial procedures and some of the reporting that will then animate the work of that A-line person, right? So I didn't hear that before recent.
Oh no, I understand that. I'm just talking about the
yeah, I hear you. So
one full-time, one part-time. Yeah.
So for me, for whatever it's worth, I don't know if this is what you're looking for out of this agenda item, Herb, but like I really appreciate all the work that's been put into this, and I'm, you know, I support, at this point, I support it. I would like to see like the bullet points in the contract in terms of their duties. If you were generous enough to want to share that with us and have us participate in that way. But I think this is the best outcome out of a long, difficult situation. So
it's not over. I mean, I would just, if you're comfortable tonight, I would look more for just, even if it's consensus, to say you're on the right track, move forward with continuing to talk with a firm or something along those lines. Because one question Roger had with me earlier today that I haven't gotten to is the overall fiscal impact of certain things. And I need to look at that bigger picture, because right now, as for instance, Becky is doing a lot of overtime. And so even though there's a lot of there's some costs that I can offload of her that comes into things. There is the NEMREC contract. There's the costs that I talked about with regard to the temp. So I want to make sure that when I'm, you know, negotiating a contract with this group, that I'm making sure that it's as streamlined financially as possible, that if we have to go over budget, that I'm trying to minimize that amount. Because I hear what Langus says about number of hours and not going over budget and all that. And there are shifts in existing situations that would need to occur that I have to more fully look at, balanced with you know, contract language that I would deal with a temp agency.
And you're writing about you're writing that clarified some of the roles and interactions was very convincing. So I would again encourage you to put that forward to the group, because I feel I feel support in this as a result of that writing, if that makes sense.
I
Okay.
appreciate that feedback.
Okay.
Rob?
So the of the person who would be most likely remote, I mean, how remote are we talking? Are we
Remote.
talking
full
like
time.
a airplane flight to come visit the town, or are we talking about somebody just isn't ready to move and can't commute that
He
far?
would he would be the he would be, you know, fully, he would be online the whole time. His seat would remain cold physically here in Norwich. So that he would not be making visits to the town. The other individual, the less expensive one that I think potentially could grow into the position, is local and would be in the office basically all the time for the time that we need him. And to me, that does speak volumes as well. But even beyond the hourly rate.
Are we ready to go to a motion?
I think so. Shall I make it?
Yes, please.
I move to authorize a contract with Robert Half Management Resources in an amount not to exceed $50,000 for use in placing a temporary finance officer.
Is there a second? Any further discussion or public comments?
I'll just indicate to the board members that I will work to get draft language for the contract first, and I can run it, just throw it to you email wise, or if you want to continue with allowing Roger and Mary to deal with stuff, I will just caution that I have to be sensitive about the open meeting law with those two being involved. But I'm happy to try to pull a draft first together before I sign it, to have you take a look at it before I went forward with executing anything.
I'm personally not concerned about open meeting law. With two of us assisting you with that, I'd be more worried about it with you sending it around to all of us.
My thoughts as well. And my hope is that we see significant decreases in the amount of overtime.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, oh yeah.
That's
I've had that discussion twice with her already, but that's the nature of right now what is trying to get stuff done. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So any further discussion? I think we have a motion in a second. Yeah, Mary made the motion, John seconded. So we will go to a vote. Mary?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well.
Thank you very much. I know this is a difficult decision and it's a tough one.
All right, done. Moving on to the budget and capital improvement plan. We received an email from Herb with some recommendations for, I don't have the email right in front of me, but I believe it was the going back on the paving to a $60,000 versus however much it was before. And the bridge, moving down those budget requests, those item requests significantly, which and adjusting I think it was the police department overtime or part-time officer wage.
Yeah, I reversed at the meeting last night or the other night. It was the 5,000. What happened was we didn't put the money in that line item that should have occurred. I set it the backward way.
which would effectively bring the percent increase to, I believe it was calculated at 6.41%.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just be asking the board if there are any other thoughts they have, and I see John, or possible changes in the budget. John.
Yeah, so I went through and looked line by line at the ones that we took across at the end of the meeting, just taking Rob's numbers. And I've got about probably 10 that I'd like to raise for consideration, because in most of the cases, they weren't in fact averages of the board. They were ones that Rob had decided he wanted a different number. So, but some of them I'm suggesting a little bit higher, some of them I'm suggesting lower, some of those in significant amounts. So if you'll indulge me, I would like to go through those individual lines.
Yes.
And this is based on the version that Herb sent around. So that is the as of 12 January 21 with TM recommend 13 January 2021.
Can, John, can you either share your screen or
Sure.
somebody share a screen so we can look at what you're seeing?
I'm okay. Yeah.
No, I've shared mine. That makes more sense because we're talking about my changes. So do you see that?
Yep.
Okay. So I've highlighted them in bright red as opposed to the burnt orange of the town manager changes.
Of your excellent wall in the background.
You like that? It's a
Yeah.
slightly different red. That would drive me insane if it were this red on my wall. So the first one is considerably larger. I just wanted to flag this. I'm happy to go with whatever you guys think. But it's line 227, repairs and maintenance, public safety facility. You know, the, why did I have that number? I thought that was oh, no, that's an average number. So never mind, actually, because that's an average number that takes in an unusual number from 2019. So
Yeah, I think I would have dropped that out.
Right.
I rescind that comment there. All right, making progress already. The next one would be line 237. This is the on-call wage for the police department. So this was not, in fact, an average of the numbers by Rob. This was just adopting the chief's number here. Mine is the average over the last 3 years. And I think that there was a sentiment that we wanted to try to minimize this, though I note that Claudette did have the town manager's number in there. So I just think this one might warrant a little bit of discussion to see where we really want to be on it.
I'm perfectly willing to drop it down to what your average is.
That's also the number I said.
As an additive, just know this is a contract, so union contract item, so it's going to be whatever it falls out to be, whatever you budget.
So that's one of the reasons that I do the averages, I've said. Do we have right, so we don't typically have control over this number. So the question is just really whether we want to try to predict it. The history, I think, has been to overestimate to make sure that there's enough to cover it. But
I think this is an example of the rolling average work making a lot of sense, right? I'm sorry, hard for me to raise my hand of the screen, but I think it's perfectly appropriate to use the rolling average.
and Roger had the rolling average in his original. That's a good point.
And
I'm okay with that. I could lower mine a little bit.
I'm okay with it too.
Me too. My
Yeah.
assumption was, in some of the ones that I did that weren't just rolling averages, was that Herb might have a better handle on what union requirements would have. I wasn't aware at the time that the blues were the ones that he thought were fixed and immutable.
Yeah,
So anyways,
No,
yeah,
that makes
rolling
sense.
is fine. Yeah.
that makes sense. And yeah, no harm, no foul, no judgment.
So John, can you just say what number you have there, just so I make sure I see it right?
Yes, it's 237, and
Yeah.
I'm making these changes as we go using my same reds
Yeah.
in column N to show what we're changing from your proposal in real time.
Yeah, no, I'm just, what's the number? 5472?
Oh, sorry. Yes, 5472.
Yep, thank
Thought
you.
you meant the line number. Sorry.
Oh, nope, I'm good on that. I'm catching the line. It's just with the red, it's a little bit hard to see on the screen, that's all.
So the next one is the same issue. 23843 was the suggestion from the chief and Herb. 19838 was the rolling average based on, and Roger and I had that. And again, it's just that it's a little bit more money, so it has a little bit more impact. So I thought I would raise it.
I'm fine with the rolling average.
I'm okay with it too.
Me too.
I attempted to go line by line, John. Thank you for doing this because I was really wanted to look to see where our variances were.
No worries. 240, this is one of the Herb changes. So this is the 5,000 part-time officer wage. Same issue, but explain to us again, Herb, the 5,000. That
So
was just that you had meant to put it across and you didn't before?
What happened is, with the part-time officers that we had to deal with over the past year, we actually accidentally put it in the regular police officer wage rather than Becky wasn't fully in understanding where that went. So instead of going in a part-time, she had put it in the regular police officer wage. So that needs to be higher than the 1,600 that you had agreed to at the last meeting. That's why I put back in the chief's suggestion of I think it's the chief's suggestion at 5,000. And then just a little bit of background on that. There's a cut. We still, because of related injuries and other things, that the part-time officer still remains a critical function of the police department. Jennifer, for the most part of the 2 years she's been chief, has not had a full complement of staff. So the part-time officer is a critical piece of the budgeting mechanism.
Okay, so that would be color on top of the 3-year average.
So is there something, Claudia, if I may.
Sure.
And I asked this last night, or gosh, was it last night? Whenever the last meeting was, I had asked, I understood that last year was, I understood all the information that was put forward, but I did look, I mentioned since FY17 that this has not been anywhere near what was budgeted. And so unless there was a really strong change in circumstances, I don't understand why we would insist on the 5,000.
Right, and so as a general budgeting philosophy matter, right, when you expect a big jump over something that historically has been quite a bit lower, but again is not very predictable, then it's, if you do that a bunch of times, then you're padding your budget. If there's an individual line item though, where you've got a reason to think that it's actually going to be significantly more, you should probably plan for that. So
yeah, just so you'll know, the actual that you got showing there, John, the 566 from fiscal year 20, that is more in line with $5,000 in actuals. That's the one thing that it went through the audit at 566 because we only discovered afterward that it should have been reported differently.
Okay, and then the previous years were quite a bit lower, you can see, but
right.
But if that's true, if last year's actuals were more like that, then that's significant.
I mean, what I will say is, you know, it sounds like there's a set of unusual circumstances, and obviously, like, I want to honor them. But
Yep.
I'm looking at these averages, and what I discussed on my first year in the board is I had noticed that these, you know, the actuals were becoming increasingly similar to their budgeting, and based on how, when we put the justifications forward, they're based in the last couple of years. And so I don't want a situation in the looking up at the future fiscal year where I have to budget $5,000 and be like, oh, it's always done that way, right?
Yeah.
We're going to lose the data from FY17 and just have, you know, the current FYs. So I'm happy to adjust to the circumstances, of course, but like, I don't want that number there in the future. There's no, like, that's what I would say.
What if we looked at that and said slightly higher than the previous high recorded, which looks like it was 2521. You know, if it was 2750 or 3000, that not knowing exactly what last year was, that would be likely to give us a cushion. Last year might have been an outlier.
So let's see.
Are you averaging all of those out, John? Is that?
Yeah.
So,
and then I'll use that instead of our. I almost know how to use Excel.
parenthesis.
So if you assume that this was really 5,000, so I just took the budget as the last one, and then the actuals before that, you come up with about 2,500. So I'd be happy to go to 3 based on the fact that last year's was higher.
I think that's a reasonable compromise.
I do too.
Let's do that.
Good on that, Roger?
Yes.
Right. The next one is line 271. This is training. So we've heard about the additional training we want to do. This is one though where we've budgeted more than we've spent every single year. So it seems like a good one to start adjusting for that fact. You know, if we start getting years where they say, yeah, we spent all our training. We wish we would have had a little bit more. We would have done X, Y, and Z, but we couldn't because we didn't have that budget.
Jennifer Frank has her hand up. Will she tell us about Rule 13?
Go ahead, Jen.
I just wanted to speak a little bit to the actual expenditures. One of the unique spots that the Norwich Police Department is in is that they have had a shift in the role of the police chief, and some of that does include a change in training. So the previous actuals that you're looking at are under a prior police chief. There has been an increased emphasis on making sure that we look to try and increase our training opportunities for our officers. I will let you know that when I came in as a sergeant, we had a 3-officer police department, not including the chief, and 2 of the 3 officers' certifications were on waiver certifications because they did not meet the training requirements. We've worked really hard over the last 2 years to make sure that that is not an issue, that we are well professional, highly trained individuals, but that does require some costs. I will also say that this last year was a little bit unique because of COVID. So that certainly also impacted some training possibilities. We're in a time where there is a shift in the expectations of law enforcement. And in order to meet that shift, we also need to make sure that that we're attending trainings that are going to give the officers the tools necessary in order to police our community in the way that the community desires to be policed. And I think that that is difficult to do. I understand we're looking a year out, and much of that training begins today and begins now. And we can do some of that online through free trainings but there are some costs that come with this process. So I guess I would speak to those two things, the impending changes we're seeing with legislature, with technology, with all of those, coupled with the goal to move us from a department of waiver officers to highly professional officers.
And Jen, your request was for 2,500. So I'm assuming that you factored all of that in when you made your $2,500 request for training. Is that a correct assumption?
That is correct.
I'd be happy to support that.
Yeah, look,
Me too.
like, I mean, I think certainly we should certainly not, I'm not in favor of increasing the line item. So I'm really thankful for John Langus bringing it to our attention. So we can continue to level fund it at 2,500. But, you know, I think I'm also strongly in support of 1,500. I don't necessarily think training is the answer to creating a police department and the vision of the community.
Mary, are you okay with 2,500?
Yes, I am. And I
Rob?
am in favor of
Yes.
training as well.
Yeah, likewise.
We're at 2,500.
Okay. Next one is line 324, equipment maintenance. It's another one where the discrepancy is pretty big, but also the discrepancy between chief and the TM. So maybe we want to leave this at more or less where we ended up, or Herb's number. The 3-year average is considerably lower. Oh, sorry, this is fire, not police.
I can't tell if the chief is there, but the main difference there is that last year you authorized the equipment safety testing to come in there. So the third of the 3 years should start to be a little bit higher than what the past trends show because of that additional stuff, and that's identified in the justifications. So put it where you need to, but just if you wouldn't mind, I just got to be sensitive to the previous years don't have that equipment safety testing in there.
And
Yeah, that's a valid point. Go ahead.
no, it's just Herb's budget request, I think, was 5,000. Is that what it was?
It was 4, right? I can't see.
Can't either, but until the math is done.
Sorry. My numbers are in the way of my.
Oops. Yeah, don't hit enter on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, Claudette, I was 4 on that.
So usually I don't know why. I was splitting the difference when there was like a major discrepancy between the two. And so I don't know why that didn't happen for this one. And so I guess I'm a little uncomfortable with deviating from my work, but it doesn't matter because there's a consensus at 4, it sounds like.
Let's go with 4.
Yeah,
The average over the 3 actuals and 1 budget with the higher budget would be 2,600. So, but I'm happy at 4. That's
4 works for
the
me.
emerging consensus. Okay, next is, it's a smaller difference, but it's insurance. I was more curious about this. Why the insurance? So isn't that one I would thought is more predictable, but the chief and Herb are fairly different on that. So my 3-year average came in kind of in between them. So I wondered why, Herb, your number was almost 50% higher than the chief's.
Because I look at the actual premium costs that we pay. So so for the latest, at the latest estimate that I had at the time was looking more at the higher number, because our last fiscal year was $8,700. So basically, I don't have the latest premium yet. So what I basically did is just round it up to that. And a function of it is partly the number of members that we have, and that information just went into Vermont League of Cities and Towns. So that'll be a hard number in the future, but I don't have the hard number right now. But again, I'm just relying on the previous year's amount.
Okay, that's what I couldn't remember. So it is variable, because it's weird for an insurance number to go lower in some years than in previous years. Usually it just goes up at some rate of increase. So it is variable to some extent, but we're not sure exactly where we're going to be relative to last.
Yeah,
I'm kind of fine on if we want to leave that where we ended up the other day. We've got it there at what Herb had suggested.
I'm fine to leave it, and hopefully it will be lower.
Yes, good point. I agree.
Okay. The next one is our favorite, the emergency generator maintenance. This one I actually had a higher number based on the actuals, but it of course is related to the question of buying one. So, we decided that we would budget just enough in the designated fund that if everything goes bad and we have to replace it with something, we have that money to do so. But we're going to try not to, because we don't want to replace a fossil fuel generator if we can have a good plan to have an overhaul of Tracy Hall that involves something non-fossil fuel based. And in that case, we probably should assume that we're going to have a little bit higher than average maintenance, because we're trying to keep that one limping along. So there, I thought the three-year average, made a good case for a little bit higher than where we ended up there.
And those are the maintenance agreements that we have with Brookfield. So part of the relationship there was recognizing that we were getting at least one new generator, which is going to have very little maintenance. So when Larry and I were looking at this, we were calculating that for getting a brand new generator, we probably don't need a maintenance contract for the first year. So we had brought it down from some of our past amounts, but also recognizing that we still have to figure out some of the maintenance contracts with that. But again, we'd recommend something a little bit less because of the fact that we were replacing some of the generators. But the number might go up again in the future once we feel that we really do need to have an annual maintenance contract, that something that Sonny can't deal with, or check the fluid levels, which he typically can do without a maintenance contract.
And this $2,500 was your recommendation, Herb, right? Based on that information.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I'm comfortable leaving it where at 2,500, truthfully.
Fine with that.
I'm okay with it too.
Okay. The next three I'll sort of deal with, and actually this whole section I'll leave together in a bucket. So Rob is a committed supporter of our concept. So in this particular category, all of these expenses, his recommendations for budget were basically what they asked for, not averages. So that's great.
Yeah.
I am fully sympathetic to that instinct. But I wanted to draw attention to that the difference there is like $5,000 between my 3-year averages and the full ask. So
Yeah, that could be chopped back.
Yeah, and when I looked at this category, there were so many seemingly overlapping, um, like public information. How does that differ? What's the difference between the trails updates and the natural resources versus the milk fry? I struggled in this section because it seems as though there were multiple buckets doing the same thing.
I mean, Claudette, you have sort of right in the middle. Actually, you and Roger both are kind of right in the middle
Yeah.
of the two numbers.
But I'm certainly fine with going with the rolling average.
The only thing I would kind of make a case for is the milk fry funds for milk fry, only because we've had a lot of occasion for some recent uptake, and so it's used by our school community, and so
It's a very good point.
I don't know how the Conservation Commission's budget on milk fry intersects with those everyday activities, but it just based on recent history, it seems reason to
Good point. It's absolutely being used more with the COVID stuff at the school. That's for sure.
But the school is also, I mean, we're responsible for the maintenance, but to some, yeah, I have no strong feelings. I know it's a valued resource, but is that the only one, Roger, that you wanted?
That's the only one that I feel like I would make a case for.
So what are you guys proposing? To keep it or to chop it back a little bit?
I'm proposing to keep it at what was recommended.
What, 1,500?
1650.
Just for that one line item.
That's for that one
milk
line.
fry, yeah.
That's okay.
I'm fine with that.
50. Is this line 385?
389.
Okay.
And the others, you're wanting a rolling average?
Yeah, I'm okay with the rolling average otherwise.
Does it, rolling average, did you take into account the alternating years of expenses?
Well, I mean, that's the thing for some of these, like, like 391, we budgeted 1,100 or $1,000 every year, and it hasn't been spent for several years.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an invitation to departments to use the money that's allocated.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I worked for an organization,
Especially in a hard year, right? If you haven't been using your money and it's a hard year.
the last quarter we would buy all the office supplies. Like, I'm not recommending that officially.
A giant pile of pencils.
We used our budget lines for this reason, for this moment.
So is there agreement with rolling average on everything but milk fry?
Sounds
Okay.
good.
Okay.
And are you making those changes, John? Yeah,
I am.
thank you. Because I'm going to ask you to email me that too.
For sure. Okay. So next one is so these start to be the ones that are biggies, and we'll cover Herb's big ones too here as we get down into these. So road crew wages. So we had chopped it a little bit based on no new general labor. It's still higher than the 3-year average. It's gone up a little bit, which the 3-year average gets you pretty close to that. I'd be happy to go up a little bit above the 3-year average even. I mean, I don't know. Are we thinking that,
That's all you
for a long time we haven't been doing what we need to be doing with the road crew?
So
It's been pretty consistent, actually.
Yeah, the difference in the numbers, as you may recall, is in the current fiscal year, that's up a little bit because I anticipated the retro pay for negotiating a new contract. So,
Yes, I did forget about that.
okay, so that's in there. And then the number has changed where your cursor is right now, the 282, that is a function of taking out the laborer. But it is a function directly related to the compensation sheet that I gave you. So it links directly all of the employees in there based on their contracted amount, including the now known CPI. The one difference that I would say from previous years budgeting to this year is that when Roberta would give you stuff, she would sort of give you what the number was for the entire year. What I've done in the compensation, it based on what someone was on July 1st. She didn't well factor in the anniversary date of someone that would shift steps. The compensation sheet, worksheet that I gave you specifically divides the fiscal year up into two. One being for each employee, one being that the CPI, they get the CPI adjustment July 1. They have that rate until they get to their anniversary date at some point, and everybody's anniversary date is different throughout the course of the year. And then on that anniversary date, they go up a step, and for the balance of the fiscal year, they're at that. So your compensation sheet is more robust in terms of the figures that I gave you, what I would call more accurate than I mean, Roberta's was good, but I've divided it up so you know specifically what the amounts are going to be during the year. So that 282 is pretty hardcore. Now,
Sounds like,
but it's chances are it might be a little bit less than that in the by the end of the fiscal year if you budget that, just because of potential changes in staffing.
I'm good with that because I had forgotten about the catch up based on the union negotiations. So I don't object to where we end up on this.
leave it at that
Yeah.
level. Yep.
282 sounds good. 282, 486, whatever.
Okay. So the next two I'll deal with together. We've talked about this a bunch. So the question is whether we have seen a sort of step change based on climate stuff, really, and are we salting and sanding more going forward because of changes in our weather? I mean, I don't know, Herb, you've now seen, I don't know, a third of our winter. So to my mind, we're pretty short on snow at the moment. So I don't know if it's safe to assume that like we're just totally out of whack on the upside on these. And so, you know, not following the 3-year average is fairly significant. It's like $40,000 between these two items. My instinct is to still sort of follow the average and realize that it's going to fluctuate, but not assume yet that it's just always going to be getting higher now.
Yeah, this year seems to be so far, according to records, a warmer year than most. So that while the guys are still going out, I don't think they're doing as much overtime as they had at this time last year, for instance, which means they're not out doing as much sanding and salting. So so this may be a light year if the winter continues the way it is. But again, you're budgeting for next year. So yeah, if I could totally project this, I wouldn't be in this job anymore. I'd be somewhere else.
You'd be selling sand, yeah.
Exactly. So, but this year you may find that we're a little bit more of a more normal or part of the average than the last couple of years, which we really had a lot of melt freezes throughout the year where we had a lot more salt and sand we were dealing with.
The 4-year average was 102,400 or 689.
What was that figure again?
The 4-year average, $102,000, 689.
Okay, thanks.
So that's 18 actual, 19 actual, 20 actual plus 21 budget?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, wait, it's it's 17 actual, 18 actual, 19 actual, and 20 actual.
Oh, okay. I guess that wouldn't have really changed it much more.
Yeah, I have a wider screen on my
Oh,
laptop.
that does bring it down because 17 was a particularly low year at 17. So
Yeah,
mine
it's-
didn't capture that. Mine would have been 18 forward.
So what was your total again, Rob, or your average?
102,689.
That seems,
Which interestingly is almost spot on with the most recent actual year we have, which is 2020.
Yeah, I think I allowed that 111 no, where's mine? 121 might have been worrying about increased costs of salt if it stayed on average, but I think 102 would probably be fairly safe.
I'm comfortable with that.
What are you comfortable with, Rob's?
The 102 wouldn't change.
Okay,
102,689.
Roger, John?
I think these are the numbers that I would like to stay more fixed about in the future. So like I'm fine, like, so in other words, if it's 120, maybe the number is not 120, if it's 110, like subject, and then only change it subject to the cost of the materials. I think this is really difficult to be predictive on, and I don't want to be like stuck with holding an empty bag. You know what I mean? So like I'm fine to take this approach that we've discussed, but I think like in the future, I'm like more keen on just accepting that number and keeping it the same every year and never talking about sanding and chemicals until the price, unless I hear something about the materials themselves. Does that make sense?
So, I mean,
Well,
that's
it's
an
also
interesting
weather
budgeting theory question, right? So typically, if you have a budget item that is critical, you absolutely want to make sure you cover it.
Yeah.
Then you would probably pick the highest number that you have seen in the last 3-5 years, which would put us at like 140 from 2019. 2019 was like a huge expensive year for this. So it's an interesting point. Do we find these to be so critical to our town operations that we don't want to borrow from Peter to pay Paul if it ends up being too high?
But it's also interesting that last year we had a lot of ice and we came in at 102,000.
No, we haven't seen, well, let's see, 2020 actual. Yes, that would be last year's. You're right. You're right.
Not without like hearing weekly updates from Herb on it, right? There was like a real guarding of but you know, and maybe that's just the philosophy we take, where, you know, we like have this bated breath over our sand and salt materials every winter, and you know.
well,
Anyway.
it is weather dependent as well as price dependent. So that makes it a little more of a crazy thing to predict.
I can't control the weather, which is why I would want to stay, but I would want to keep it at like 1 teen, like 112, like whatever the 1 teen number is. I could clearly the case for 120 is
A little too much.
perhaps, but
So though, how about John's average then? That one, is it 111?
111.
Yeah,
Yes,
average.
111,
Yeah.
148.
148.
Or Claudette was at 115. Also not a bad.
I like the
Place down.
Claudette one, personally.
I'm happy to support that.
All I can say is I've got 4 studded snows, so I like it.
Not everyone does, but yeah.
Yeah, true.
So we okay with the 115 then?
I am with hopes. With
Madam
hope.
Chair.
Yeah. go
Madam Chair, sorry to Budinsky, but Larry just texted me saying that his star 9 doesn't seem to be working. So I know that Larry wanted to say something. So I don't know if Roger could help him.
He will have to push star 6. I can't unmute him himself.
Well, I guess he's not, his hand isn't going up, but so.
Can
yeah.
he push star 6 to unmute himself to speak?
Let me, hold on.
Unless I think he's here on Zoom, so he could just unmute himself. There he is.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I guess my philosophy over the years that I've done this is such that if I had 10 years of data, I might look at the high and low and I'd take it out. And then I'd look at maybe where the average was for the 5 years, 6 years in between. And then I'd probably try to go a little above that. I think the idea here is to try to budget an adequate amount of sand or salt for the season, such that you don't have to come back in February and have a rush situation where you need to buy some more salt or some more sand. It is an item which once you purchase it, if it's in the shed, you can use it next year. So it's not like a lost money. Item two is I always account for the fact that price usually increases year upon year. And that's typical for the last 20 some odd years. I've seen price increase. Typically, I've seen it go up 3 to 5%. On top of that, operations have also changed, as you've probably been reminded in the last 3 or 4 years. Excuse me, from the last 2 years from the previous 3 or 4. We're out there earlier and we're addressing the road conditions prior to the school buses. So you are going to spend more material as well. You can make this dollar amount anything you want, but basically you're using a crystal ball. And you can chat about it as you want, but I guess my point would be is since it's not a lost item, I would think you'd want to budget somewhere maybe over the average of the last number of years so that you had enough money so that you didn't have to make an emergency purchase. That seems to work elsewhere, but if it doesn't work in Norwich, well, that's fine. But why would you want me to come back in the middle of February and say, we're out of money, I got to have an emergency stipend to get salt or sand for the roads? It's kind of like, you could lower your fuel budget for the trucks, but if you run out of fuel, you're kind of in an awkward position.
So that sounds very consistent with what we're deciding here. So using an average, but the average is 102. So we're saying 115. That's about a 12% increase over average. That sounds like exactly what you're recommending.
Well, it depends on a lot of factors, just like you've all said. I just wanted to let you know that it depends on the winter, and winters are not the same from year to year. There may be some sort of a trend to going to warmer weather. That's probably a fact, but the price is difficult to predict, and we have changed operations from the way we address roads. I think that was evidenced in the last town meeting that we had, where a woman got up and said she wanted to recognize the highway crew for the work that they've done for the last 2 years. The highways have been taken care of in a great manner. So I think that does take material, and it does take monies to do that.
Okay, thank you. So are we still okay with the 115 on salt and chemicals?
Yeah, I'm fine with the recognition that we have saved ourselves a lot of labor for next year's discussion. I think this should just stay the same every year.
Well, it can't stay the same every year.
Yeah.
Stay the same, like say 115. If the materials change, then change it. I think I was okay with 121 too, for all of the reasons. I feel like it's really hard to split hairs. And so I'm fine with all the numbers, to be honest.
Okay. And then sand, John, I'm guessing that again, it's your rolling average.
Yep. It does have an outlier though. It's got this weird 2018 where I think we did what Larry's talking about. We bought a bunch of sand in the previous year. We didn't end up using it all, so we didn't have to buy that much the next year. But then the year after that, we bought a ton. So the last 2 years, we've averaged like 102 each year. So, I'd be fine leaving it at the number we ended up with, which is 105 if we want to do that.
Me too.
Let's leave it.
Okay. Moving on. Getting close to the bottom. Okay, now we've got our favorite. Oh, no, we're not quite at our favorite. Paving, oh, contracted paving. So that was a pretty big difference between what we expect to do and what we've done in the past. Is this the one, Herb, that Claudette keeps focusing on, the 1 mile of totally redoing it as opposed to just a new paving surface?
No, that's the 1 mile reclamation is the big $243,000 project in the capital budget. That's what I've said, what I basically have taken out until we get caught up on RSMS, meaning inventories of the roads and stuff, so that we would probably do a more normal paving projects, whether that's Beaver Meadow Road or what have you. So that's why the designated fund was just at 60. This paving one here is the contracted services line item. I'm sorry, the other projects one is the one that I think was the past director's sort of fluff line item. And that's why you can see the trend budgeting wise that we brought that down from the regular 60 down to where we're at now of the 30 and where you put it at 25. There are throughout the course of a year times that we do need to bring a contractor on board to do various stuff that we didn't anticipate, as a for instance. So I would appreciate still having an amount there, but we've tried to cut the level of excess, for lack of a better term, in that line item.
Are we talking about paving or other projects?
We're talking other projects.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the paving in that one is simply when we have a contracted service where if we dig up a roadway to put a new culvert in, you got to go put a patch back in there, and having the contractor come out to do the linear patch across the road and roll it out. That's generally that stuff, as well as if we have to hire somebody to do kind of the potholes in the winter time with the soft patch. That's where we have a contracted service in there.
So do you want to know the justification for the 66,354? It's
Yes.
it's the culvert flushing, the culvert replacement, RSMS, the sidewalk inventory, and the traffic volume study. My number reflects the amount minus the sidewalk inventory, but Larry lists all of the projects in his justifications. So culvert flushing, culvert replacement, RSMS, the sidewalk inventory, and the traffic volume study.
So that's a lot.
I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that then. That's
So
helpful.
keeping
Thank you.
Laurie's number? Keeping which number?
So I'm fine with the number we came up with the other day, which was 47,938, which is Rob's average of
Per
the
year,
various
yeah,
things.
rolling.
So the
I
thing
would actually, based on that, I'd probably actually raise it. So.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
this is the
okay.
line item where with that amount, you're gonna get like maybe culverts done. You're not gonna get the RSMS, the sidewalk inventory, or the traffic volume study. So there's choices to be made here in this case.
Yeah.
You should go.
So I'd be happy going up to one of those other numbers. So your number, Roger, why is it different than Mary's? What is out of it?
I have cynicism around sidewalks and want to push it off and deal with them differently.
Yeah, I'm pro sidewalk. I'd support Mary's number actually.
Okay.
Oh, goodness. Okay. Yeah. Well, considering
Okay.
all the categories that would come out of it. So it might be good to break some of that out in future budget.
Mm-hmm.
From the town manager's perspective, those inventories, Roger, you may push stuff out for sidewalks or something, but generally the real value for me in having those updated RSMS and bridge inventories and stuff, it's really going to help to define the priority projects that we need that ultimately can put money and stuff to. So when you want me to do strategic planning, those are some of those critical pieces that I need to work with to do that.
So,
You know what?
so John, where your cursor is, line 432, that's going back up to 66354.
I would support that.
Yeah, and I agree that the studies need to be done. I would rather take the $14,000 out of the sidewalk designated fund than cut this one.
Different cynicism around sidewalks.
So
So sorry, what was that suggestion, Claudette? I wasn't sure what that number
66354.
was. You are fine with that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. He giveth and he taketh away. The next one, the average is actually higher. That was on the crack ceiling. It's a little bit of a difference. The number actually ended up being,
Actually, I'm not sure why that's still at 18,944 since we have agreement generally that it should be 15,000.
That's a little
yeah,
odd.
that's
isn't
weird.
it?
I probably typed too fast the other night.
Yeah, I would.
Looks like, yeah, just a typo.
So maybe, yeah, that was maybe supposed to be 15,944 because that was where
Yeah.
Rob was. So I'm fine with that.
If we change it, yeah.
Change it, yeah.
Okay. Next one, this is a fairly large difference to the downside.
So wait, I'm sorry. Why was crack ceiling 15,944?
Because
It was
you guys were all at 15
Rob-
and the average between the 3-year average that I had and
Okay, so we're boosting the recommendation from our employee.
well, we're boosting from the 315s, but that was just because it was supposed to come across at 15,944 and it accidentally didn't. But
I'm just saying Herb and Larry said 15 and we just gave them an extra grant, which I'm fine with, but
yeah.
okay.
Good point. Good point. Do you want it to be 15?
I'm all for crack ceiling, I suppose.
Just say yes to crack ceiling. Just say no to crack. Pavement marking. Pavement marking. We have not done as much of this as we're saying we're about to do. And
But
that's
wasn't there a reduction because of weather last year? Like the
COVID.
winter closed in really fast and then COVID. So
yeah,
maybe
so
we'd like
we've
to
pretty
do a little more.
consistently had actuals about 20. So I guess that was the idea. We're going to try to make up for what we missed on some. Was that the idea?
I think so.
I'm fine with that.
And can I speak here? This is Larry.
Yeah.
Sure.
This has been an issue where I've gone out to bid on this and we cannot stripe the whole town for the number that we're budgeting for. And these are safety items. These are, when you stripe roads, it is a safety item. And so I don't know where a 3-year average works into there, but I just want you to know that if we don't stripe pretty soon, the parking and some of these other lines down on Main Street, you're going to lose your layout and it's going to cost you a lot more money just to reestablish those lines. So I think we're probably within a year or two of losing that. And I know from bidding that there's probably a price increase gone on at this point in time, but I need at least 32,000 to stripe the town as you see it today.
You're doing the crack ceiling, John.
Did I really?
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
What line is that? Pavement 434.
434.
So
434, the
17.
4-year rolling.
But I think this is an instance. Have we read Larry's justifications for this? So he says,
Yeah, and he just again mentioned it that it would going with the bid info. He estimates that it'll be 32,000, which is
32.
and for 22, you got crosswalks, stop bars, and arrows. For 32, you get center line, fog line, stop bars, handicap crosswalks, bicycle stencils. Praise be, right?
Fog lines, don't you?
so we
Let's go
All right,
up.
so do we want to stay? Do we want to go up to the 32?
Let's go to the 32. Like he says, it's safety.
or I was going to say let's keep it where it is, but
Oh, okay. All right.
I was going to say keep it where it is.
Uh-huh.
which is basically right in between Claudette and Roger. Or between Claudette, Mary, and Roger.
Knowing that we won't possibly get it all done.
I mean, I think
Thinner
that,
lines,
I think that is
maybe
true.
thinner lines.
Well, I think that's a good point, actually, Claudette, because, you know, as I go into town, like, I don't know if that's VTrans or what have you, but like that work is not done. And last year I was like, I was in conversation about, you know, Route 130 or Beaver Meadow or Union Village Road, you know, that was really delayed as well. So, I mean, I think there's something to be said by like, you know, we fund these markings, you know, you would hope that they would get done, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where are you guys coming out on this? I'm still stuck on my 32.
So Roger, you were the low one there. Are you saying you want to jump up and meet them at 32?
I mean, I'm okay. I guess, you know, I really hear Claudette's point on, you know, will all of this work be done? Like, you know, will but, and if so, if not, then, you know, I want to be more conservative. But like, it sounds like Larry have an extensive justification. And so I am.
But here's another one that is so dependent on weather and how quickly does the snow leave and when can they do the work and
There's also
A little bit.
using the format argument that Larry just made. I don't know. If it doesn't get done, the money's not spent. But if there's a chance to do it, it would get all caught up and it would be safety and you wouldn't lose your format.
I think the other question you have to consider is what liability you're willing to assume by not striping and doing your roadways.
I'll support the 32, but I hope you know, I'll say no more. I'll support the 32.
I will
Yeah,
too.
32.
32.
Okay. Okay, so these two are the two town manager changes, 468, 469. So these are big drops. You want to walk us through these, Herb? It obviously reduces the budget a lot. It reduces that increase a lot. What are you thinking there?
So basically what happens under the paving side is, as I indicated earlier, that we're going to hold off on doing the reclamation project on 132, which is the $243,000. And to understand, reclamation is when you have that big machine that comes in and digs down, takes up all the pavement and everything, and you basically replane and then put new pavement on top. Instead of just doing, typically what we've been doing in town is another overlay over a different segment of roadway. So, but to basically get a better understanding, to put it off to, and in addition to basically find a significant cut in the budget from where we had left off at the last meeting. Larry and I had a lot of discussion and we agreed that if we can just keep the designated fund at the level fund, we'll hold off on the reclamation project. We'll probably focus on another paving project that's not a reclamation related thing. Obviously, we'll still apply for paving grant along the way. Hope we get it, but we probably won't this year. So that's where we're at from this standpoint. So the major chunk can come down because of the fact that we're holding off on the reclamation project. So that's why that's at 60 from wherever it was at 275. And then the second one, the bridges, essentially what that's doing is there's three projects that we have that we're more or less targeting in the near future. One is basically the Tigertown box culverts that you're already under grant considerations for, and then the Route 132 box culvert that you've heard a lot about with regard to that replacement. That's underway. So maintaining those two projects, we need $157,000 to do that. And then for the designated fund, but we basically said we can put off Chapel Hill for a little bit more. So we've taken the 18,000 out of that, whatever it was last week, to bring it down to 157. So those are the two major changes there. So it's not to say that the reclamation project back in the future. But I think what Larry and I have agreed to do is to say, let's hold off for a year, retool the capital budget when we get to that process again next year. And also the same thing with Chapel Hill. And so it's basically just going through a level of repriority for right now.
I'm more than happy to accept those changes
I am too.
Huh?
with
Yep.
appreciation to Herb and Larry for doing them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those are obviously
Good
big
point.
changes. Agreed.
Do we have a sense of agreement that those are going to come back at some point, the need for doing those?
Yes,
Oh,
and,
yeah,
but I think too, the
For sure.
value to the discussion that I'm offering to you is that I also defended the need earlier tonight to have those studies done, such as the road surface management
Mhm.
system, the RSMS.
Mhm.
That's the road one that needs to be updated, and that will allow us to have a better foundation
That's
for establishing priorities for which roadways need paving improvement, et cetera. And it can include that, obviously would include the Route 132 reclamation project.
Well, thank you for saying that, Herb, because I think you were I don't want to say you were insistent. You defended the paving and the bridges line items fairly, strongly. You said that it was really crucial to like maintain our future infrastructure. And so, to hear all of these arguments and now to like take a turn, I guess it's comforting me to know that you want that we're going to get more information. We're going to have some more third-party assessment, and then we'll retool. Like, I think because otherwise, I was kind of taken aback when I saw these cuts, and I didn't really move on them, right? Accordingly. So.
Like, I think, yes, I have to find some money, but, and that, when the budget process gets into the political process, you have to step back from what you've put forward and defended. And sometimes you have to switch. And that's what Larry and I did. I mean, those two line items are only two line items, but we had a lot of discussion on both of those line items. And, but the fact that you're committing yourselves to money for the RSMS is a function too, for me, a comforting function for me, that shows that you're willing to help us get that independent sort of third-party perspective or the updated information that we need to retool our priorities. Because
Okay.
until we have that, we have to either stick with older priorities and move forward with those. Not saying that the ones in the past were bad. It's just that roads do change over time depending on weather and all that sort of stuff. So that's invaluable to update those periodically.
Thanks.
So what is that? So that's all the changes that I had to suggest, plus all of Herb's changes.
So is that the bottom, the 4,780,866? So it's slightly different.
I think so. That's what I was going to ask. Does anyone have the number of Herb's before we started this?
Yeah, I
It's pretty
got-
close, actually. We
It's really
added
close.
as much as we took away because of the different items.
You still went down a little bit. You went down 1/10%.
Went down like $1,000.
So you were, sorry, I'm trying to
That's
find the
okay.
number.
The return on that time was huge. All right, I'm going to stop my share now. I'm going to send this to you, Herb.
Thank you. Yeah, you're about $1,200 less than where you were
Yeah.
before.
Right. It's still good to go through it.
Sweet.
Understand it better. Now, when we make them, if we make the motion, we should use the number we came up with just now, right? The 4,780,866.
That would be awesome.
Pam Smith has her hand up.
Go ahead, Pam.
Thank you. I believe Manny sent you an email telling you that the Finance Committee asked me to convey some information from our meeting last night. The Finance Committee identified 3 line items that they were going to recommend changes in. two you already covered tonight, the sand and the other projects in the DPW budget. So we were recommending much lower numbers, but you know, that's a moot point at this time. The third item that the Finance Committee wanted to recommend, Claudette touched on a little bit earlier, and that was recommending that no additional monies be put in the sidewalk designated fund. There's about $80,000 in there right now, and there's no plan for the sidewalk. So it was the consensus of the Finance Committee to suggest that putting additional monies in there didn't make any sense at this time. So that would lower your final number by $14,000. And, you know, we just asked, you know, that you consider that suggestion.
Yeah, and the reason gonna be asking or asked for reconsideration of that sidewalk was for the same reason as the road reclamation. Let's get the reports done before we just either spend money or put more money aside. So those,
Yeah, there's no plan. So you'd be putting money aside for what, you know, that,
we've been putting money aside for years and years and years and years.
Well,
and no
it's
work
not-
ever gets done.
Okay, it's not completely without a plan in that there was a study done about the sidewalks, but I do agree that there should be a more comprehensive plan, including an inventory and an assessment of condition of different areas. But it's not completely, you know, not completely random how it was set up.
Well,
Just saying.
if you're having the inventory done, I think it makes a lot of sense, you know, to get an assessment, and then that would help determine what kind of money is needed. But currently there's about $80,000 there. And, you know, it'd be good to see how far that money would go when the inventory is done and an assessment is done of where the priorities are.
Yeah. So what are other board members' thoughts?
I mean, I similarly
hate
zeroed out that fund for, you know, not for quite the same reasons. I just think it should have some governance, but, you know, I think it's, you know, I am fine also funding it if others agree. Like, you know, it's not something I would fight really strongly. I stated my case with sidewalks. I would like to wait and come up with some shared governance in addition, not necessarily even a third party plan, just some shared governance to move forward with them. But I've said I don't need to say anymore.
John?
I mean, I'm on record supporting. I want to merge these two things. I think it's super archaic and totally wasteful to have two municipalities. I think they should be merged. One town should take care of the sidewalks. I think, yeah, adding coherence to this, I'm super supportive of. If we want to take that out for that reason, I didn't have much of a problem with having it in there because I'm pro sidewalk in general. But yeah, I hear that and support that sentiment.
Rob?
I would have to agree with John. I'm pretty pro sidewalk, and I think there's been enough consideration, enough requests from the public to sort out these problems that we've been having, that to ignore it completely is not the best idea.
Right, but what about not funding the 14,000?
I'd rather leave that there.
So we actually have kind of 3 saying don't fund it this year and 2 saying fund it this year.
Sorry, I didn't hear. What did Mary say?
I want to fund it. I don't want to zero out the fund, and I do want that 14,000 in there because when we get it figured out, we want to have something to work with.
Yeah,
We'll need it for sure. I mean, we know that there's way more than that needs to be spent to get those up to, and it's, you know,
Right.
look, I mean, if people bring up the of the painted lines. I'd be kind of surprised if like a spotty painted line has created legal liability, but maybe it has. I'm not an expert in that. I know that a crappy sidewalk that someone falls and injures themselves on, that definitely creates legal liability.
Roger?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to just say that there's some other public comments, but I don't know where we are on this discussion. I mean, the other thing I will say is like a lot of my decision on sidewalks was because we were making contributions to other things, but we've kind of cut from 11.5 to 6. So I don't feel, the priorities, the whole priority aspect has kind of gone throughout the window in a little bit, because I was saying we should not think, we should talk about Tracy Hall. We should talk about, funding our bridges. We should have paving funded properly. But like all of these haven't been modified. So I'm still think what I think about sidewalks, but I am less passionate. So Mary has a particular passion, so I'm willing to, and everyone else has identified as pro sidewalks on the t-shirt.
John and Rob also share my passion for sidewalks. Yes.
It's not like I don't like sidewalks. It's just but anyway. So it sounds as though my request that we pull the funding for the designated fund sidewalks has been rejected.
Yes.
So it stays. And Roger, you said that there were other public comments?
So Herb put his hand up. I don't know if he wants to round out the conversation on sidewalks, but then Demo and then Cheryl Lindbergh had their hands up.
So very quickly, I think I would have to check, but I think it's about $100 per linear foot to do sidewalk replacements. So with your existing fund, you could do about 800 linear feet of sidewalk.
And then you said Demo, and then and that's isn't that to like a 6-foot ADA compatible, not just repair of what is existing?
Right, 5-foot ADA. And a lot of your sidewalks are bituminous pavement and not concrete, and bituminous pavement is cheaper, but you do have cement sidewalks as well.
Okay. So Demo, did you have something you wanted to?
Yes, I did. I'm glad you kept the money in for sidewalks because I'm pro sidewalk.
Name and locatable address, please.
Oh yes, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Demo Sophonis, 82 Glen Ridge Road, Norwich. So I'm pro sidewalk, so I'm glad you did keep that money in, but that's not what I'm here to speak about. It sounded like just prior to that discussion item, you were about ready to vote on the final budget. Is that correct?
We have not put forward a motion as yet.
But you were getting ready to do that, correct?
That is probably, I'd say that's correct.
Okay, could somebody just throw up on the screen real quick? I want to speak a little bit about the community policing. So whether you need it up on the screen or whether you just want to hear me out, either one is fine with me.
So I don't believe, if somebody can take a quick look, that there was any change in the community policing line item.
Yeah, I went from $1,200 a couple of weeks ago to Monday night, $653, because you were using the averaging that Rob was doing. So I just want to speak about that for a minute, and then if you want to throw it up on the screen, you can. So I listened to the January 11th, 2021 meeting, and I learned a lot about the budgeting process. Many of you know I've filmed these for years, and the budget cutting techniques change over the years. And I commend the Select Board for the work that you have done on the budget over the past several months and realize it's not an easy task. I saw you tackle the big ticket items on Monday and agree they should be prioritized. It appeared to me that you gave these items serious thought before cuts were made, and you've done this the past 2 or 3 months. I also want to jump forward and say I witnessed a lot of that tonight, and I was very impressed with the way you handled that. However, when you went down the list of smaller budget line items, an average amount was used, and I believe it was Rob Gear's column. That amount was $653. The community policing line item was cut from the 1,200 by over 50% down to the 653. In a blink of an eye, with no real thought about what impact this will have on the many nicely done NPD programs that have been implemented according to the Select Board's community policing guidelines, which the Select Board approved and accepted. We're almost done here, so bear with me. Thank you. You would be amazed if you could see the smiles and looks on the kids' faces at MCS and their parents and other communities members when the NPD shows up to do a community policing event / program. If the board cuts this line item, you will be impacting these kids today and hurting the community tomorrow. So please come on down, respin the wheel again to up the ante to the original $1,200. The benefits of these programs far outweigh the costs. If you read some of the stories, and I'm sure a lot of you have, that I have posted on my About Norwich blog, you would see the benefits and the smiles for yourself. So thanks for the fine work you do for the town of Norwich, and I would hope that you would, especially after tonight, I believe you took from the training budget on the police, you took about, if I'm guessing, about $900. So maybe you could, and this is training at a time of COVID-19, which is specialized training and things that you hadn't planned for and wanted to use. So you took that away. Maybe you're maybe you'd use your wisdom and put some of that back and bring it back up to the 1,200. 2 weeks ago, Claudette was shooting for 1,200. Mary was shooting for 1,200. John was at 364. Roger was at 0. And Rob at that time was 0. And then since then came up to the 653. Thank you for hearing me out. Please tell me what you would do.
We already kind of went over that line item, so I'm gonna.
Thanks, Damon.
There's no room for improvement. There's no way you can add $600 to that.
John?
I mean, I would just say that we're not cutting relative to what's been spent. We're cutting what's relative to what's been budgeted. But, you know, so my average was the actuals. I just re-averaged based in including the higher budget for 21 because we don't know what'll be spent. We're definitely spending a little bit more under Chief Frank than we did under Chief Robinson, but that's still 600. So about 9% higher than the average actual spend over the last several years. So, I mean, I think.
But you shouldn't punish somebody because the previous person didn't spend. Okay.
We're not.
We're not punishing, but
I mean, you have money in the budget. You have a lot of programs, and you have to admit a lot of what she does is a very positive effect on this community.
Right, and none of that funding for what she is currently doing has been cut. So I'm going to move us along to Cheryl. Thank you, Dima.
All right.
Thank you, Dima.
Thank you.
Hi, Cheryl Lindbergh, 59 Koch Road. And I just wanted to follow up on your thoughts regarding sidewalks. I don't think that you need to be pro or not pro sidewalks to do the right thing in a budget process. I never would like to think that I don't want to support. I'm not supporting teachers because I don't support a school budget. That's not the point. And I really would like you to think that this $14,000 is a change that's to the positive right now until we have a plan. And I agree with comments being made about merging the fire district and all, but I think that the money being delayed, postponed by this designated fund contribution is a great idea and a wise decision on the part of the select board. I'd like to see you reconsider that item. Thank you.
Yeah, and I don't think that there's select board support for reconsidering the item. So
I appreciate though what Cheryl had said, if I may, because yeah, we don't want to get into that kind of discourse. And I thought that's a smartly said, Cheryl. I hear you. Thank you.
Any other comments? If not, then I'm willing to entertain a motion.
Linda Cook has her hand up.
Go ahead, Linda.
Just star 6, Linda, if you can.
Sorry. Linda Cook, 147 River Road. I agree, the ups and downs, you're trying to prioritize everything. I don't know what the final number is or how far you're down. It didn't seem like you went down much before the 6% And being the year with having COVID-19 and not knowing yet what the percentage of funding there'll be for income sensitivity, some people are already struggling, and it's going to be a hard time for people to accept the school tax change, the town tax change. I'm just wishing there was a little bit of wiggle room there that could get it down to closer to the 3% that the finance committee was asking. And maybe that's not possible because you have done quite a bit of work on this budget. That's all I'd like to bring up for some of the people out there that are struggling. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. And believe me, that's always foremost in my mind as well. The people that are hurting, but we will. I mean, I think the board has done a tremendous amount of work, and I don't want to exclude Herb and the department heads to bring us from a 20+% increase to a 6.04 or whatever it was % increase, because we all have our passions, and I'm not, as much as I wish we could have gotten this lower, I'm not sure we could. So, and now would love to entertain a motion.
Okay, I'll try to make the motion. I move to accept the fiscal year ending 2023 capital budget and program with the changes made by the select board and offered by the town manager as a function of the fiscal year end 2022 operating budget.
In the amount of $4,788,866, if I may offer that.
Yes, thank you.
The motion made is on the capital budget right now.
Oh, capital.
So,
okay. So I don't understand the motion. Shall I withdraw it? So we're not talking the operating.
It's the B, it's not the A.
Okay, so I'll withdraw the motion I just did because I should have been on B. And let's see. I move to recommend to the voters a fiscal year and 2022 town budget of
$4,780,866.
Yes, inclusive, not inclusive of other monetary articles.
is there a second?
Okay.
Do I have a second?
Yeah, sorry, second.
Motion made by Mary, seconded by John. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll roll call. Mary?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. And we'll see what the voters say. So, and now I guess, Herb, I'm going to need you to explain the purpose of that second motion.
So as part of the budgeting process, typically what I want to be able to do, and my hope is to do it for this coming fiscal year, is that you deal with the capital budget and program first. In other words, you have it first, you deal with that, and then you go into the operational budget process. So the idea is that I would have the department head, now that we've got more fodder with regard to the capital budget program with a second generation, I would be bringing it to which is in the normal time frame, which is to bring it to you before you've received the operational budget, so that you have a separate discussion about your capital projects. So you get a sense of what's going on. When you're basically settled on where you need to be, that impacts the operational budget in terms of what you get. You can still do it more or less back to back, but ideally the capital budget and program is the planning tool that you use that helps create your operational budget. So where I'm headed in this is the acknowledgement of the capital budget and program, which is basically for now showing you where you look to be in the next 5 years, starting in July 1, 2023. But it also is trying to essentially lock you into the capital projects that are recommended beginning July 1, 2022, subject to the changes that you made tonight. As a, for instance, the 243 reclamation project for Route 132 is not, that comes out because of the action that you did tonight, but the other topics are in there. I do know that, you know, to a degree, this has a piece of discussion where you're going to talk about when Larry wants to buy a truck that's in there, a big truck, that you have to approve the allocation of the designated fund expense from that standpoint, which is a future discussion. But for purposes of the planning tool, what I would like to be able to do is make sure that this is adopted as part of your process, so you understand a function of why a lot of the numbers are the way they are with regard to your operational budget and the way that staff has recommended capital projects to you.
What would be your timeline in an ideal year to present the capital budget?
Ideally, I would want the department heads and others that have capital projects to get stuff to start getting stuff together in the August timeframe, where it would be essentially rolled out in September, probably adopted in the end of September, beginning of October timeframe. And then once it started to roll out, they work on their operational budgets. Again, ideally trying to get that to you, the operational budget, by the end of October into the first meeting of November.
Okay.
So it's not totally separate and apart where it's all forgotten because they're 6 months apart. The idea is that you typically do the capital budgeting process first, and then that helps you in giving you some numbers already for your operational budget, such as, and this is where the finance committee can come into a helpful situation, is that that would be helpful to have them participate in that process. They can help say, well, if we're going to have this for the future, what are the designated funds amounts that we need? You know, what is the ceiling amount and all that as we get into that. So that's where the brokering of your committee with department heads and everything is where it can critically play in.
And then this motion also takes into account the suggested large reductions in capital spending that help to bring this budget down to 6%. So it is.
That's why it's set as a function of the operating budget. Yeah, because I knew
Right.
that the capital budget that currently stands, as a for instance, has that the reclamation paving project in there, and I knew that we've removed that. So
okay.
Yep.
Roger first, then John.
So I appreciate what this is supposed to, I appreciate what this is. I think if only to make I think it's like you know, as much as things are political, it's like the right political move to like have a motion with the approved capital budget, right? So we don't, if anything, it adds, it smooths out some of our future approvals of spending and in the future. I mean, I understand and why we would bring this up into a budgeting process, but I think the Finance Committee's memo also laid out a similar time frame that you're echoing to. But that being said, I use the capital budget to inform a lot of my thinking about the operating budget, which is not the way to think about budgeting. And I will say that, I think. And so I think it's really hard for me to approve or even vote either way about something that, while was presented, wasn't discussed, with either amongst ourselves as part of this process or with some of our partners. And so, and I don't think, maybe there's shared blame in all of that. And, I'll be brave and take on some of that blame, but like, I can't vote one way or another on that kind of motion personally. And I know that it's difficult. So
I respect that.
John?
I'm good. I'm good. My brain's fried after that. I'm ready for a break. I can't remember my question.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with Roger. To me, it may be the political or the how we want, where we want to go, but we're not quite there. And so next year, I would think that this would be an appropriate motion, but not this year.
Sorry, I remember. My point was to recognize the compromise that was made in the reduction of those two very key line items to get the budget into a manageable territory here. I had proposed, and I think maybe it was certainly you had proposed, Claudette, using some of the undesignated fund balance to offset some of these items to try to manage that increase. I'm personally of the view that I would be happy to leave that where it stands at the sort of top end of the range. Hopefully we'll come in a little bit below budget for the third or fourth time in a row this year. And that will be something that's well above the range next year. And we can talk about having that as something to, again, help to, bring these items that we're still bringing up to speed with where we all want them to be. Where next year, maybe it's, over $100,000, so we can add into that and help that transition again. But I'm happy to not touch those dollars this year and just let that move forward personally.
Robin, Mary, are you okay with not addressing this?
Yeah, I'm okay with not making this motion, but I do appreciate that it's in there, because we have seen a capital budget, and we've seen Herb and Larry kind of working to change it to help our operating budget this year. So I appreciate the process, but I do agree that I think voting on it tonight it is premature, because we haven't been through the process yet.
Rob, any thoughts?
I agree.
Okay.
It's premature.
I'm sorry, Herb.
For me, anyway.
All right, then it is 8:40. We're due for a break. 10 minutes, 8:50.
50.
Norwich Select Board meeting, the 13th of January. Our next item on the agenda are the town meeting articles or warrant and articles, which will be decided on Monday. But just Herb had mentioned that if there were any articles that the select board, any select board members were contemplating to maybe raise them today. We can do that, or we can just wait till Monday. What's the board's pleasure?
I don't have any, but
We should talk about the regional energy coordinator. We should talk about the recommendations from the energy committee, right?
Oh, okay.
No. Yeah, I think we should talk about those two items.
So do you want?
any that are before us, I would say I'm happy to talk about tonight so that if there aren't any additional ones, we don't have to meet on Monday.
Do you want me to speak to them? Or
Go right ahead.
okay, so I mean, we had correspondence from the Energy Committee.
Join the meeting.
I'll speak about the Regional Energy Coordinator. So there was the Regional Energy Coordinator obviously went forward without our participation for seemingly reasons on disagreements and structure. But they've since made a hire. It was the former coordinator out of Hartford, who really inspires confidence and comes well recommended from other participants in the program. And so with these new circumstances and facts on the ground, combined with the voter interest in the previous years and the fact that the money remains earmarked, we should just think about bringing it forward. I know that Linda Gray is here and she's had really more specific conversations if we would like to hear from her, but otherwise the gist is the circumstances have changed. It's a well-regarded hire who is doing good and meaningful work to the benefit of our community. There's presumed interest from our own community from the last year's vote, and the money is already restricted, and so we should look to perhaps put it forward. So.
I don't believe the money was restricted. I think this would be a new appropriation.
Claire can provide some precision on that.
Was specifically designated for the Regional Energy Coordinator in that original proposal last year with a sunset provision on it for this fiscal year.
So it's sunsetted, so we'd have to.
Correct. So that right. So what the Energy Committee is recommending, and I concur with them, is to say with the already appropriated money that the taxpayers have put out, that we should just move the sunset provision to the end of next year, and that it's start for the next fiscal year.
We've reached, the one thing I'll add, and then I'll cease talking on this, is folks have done the extended legwork of reaching out to Peter Gregory, who has reportedly, welcomed our joining. So.
Any other select board questions?
I'd like to just hear from Linda Gray. I think she's here. A little bit, not too much.
Go ahead, Linda.
Yes, hi. Is there a particular question? I mean, Roger's given a nice summary. I don't have a lot to add. The memo adds other details. I'm happy, if there are particular questions, I'm happy to expand on any of it.
Would you happen to know, Linda, how the position has worked out for any of the towns, like what has been accomplished?
Yes, I talked to representatives from 3 towns, and our concern as the position was getting underway related to how the towns would oversee the position. They all expressed no concerns about that. They said that was good. They expressed in specific some details. So I tried to include in the memo a few bullet points that folks mentioned to me, but so the rep from one town highlighted how Jeff had been able to help them pull together data. Like, so the town person had been the liaison to individual town staff, but then Jeff had pulled together the data into a useful spreadsheet that was helping them get started on that. Others talked about just seeing benefit in the monthly steering committee meetings and sharing what's going on in other towns. They all spoke about like Jeff's particular, like knowledge and expertise that he's gained and his contacts with useful resources, say at Efficiency Vermont and other agencies like that. So it was just, nobody had any scintilla of negative reaction.
Is there a particular focus that the Norwich Energy Committee would like to see in utilizing this position? Like,
Well, and again,
wish
we
list
listed a few things in the memo. In part, I would say kind of data information is one of the key things that I would suggest myself.
Okay, so you're seeing some utility in going forward with this. Okay.
Yes, and I do want to acknowledge that I was the person this time last year. You asked me about it, and I would be like,
You're
"Nah."
skeptical.
Yeah,
you're quite skeptical. I remember that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, in a sense, I'm the perfect person to switch, to change minds. I change my mind.
Thanks, Linda.
Go ahead, John.
I would just echo my support for this, appreciation for the committee and their continued focus on this stuff. It was a really frustrating year for the Energy Committee. It's great to have them, right back at it. I think having this resource to help us to reconceive of this project that we had approved and then didn't would be a great resource as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Rob, do you have any thoughts, any comments?
No, I agree. I think everything I've heard sitting in on the Energy Committee meetings, he seems to be doing an excellent job and certainly no negative comments whatsoever. And I think assistance in compiling data, being able to get hard factual evidence to work on to make the improvements that the town needs to continue with would be very useful.
Okay. All right, thank you. And then there were two, Roger, from the Energy Committee?
Yes, the other one, well, how do you want to, in terms of process, do you want to talk about the next one, or do you want to should one make a motion about this one, or I'm happy to go ahead, or we could finish up this business, whatever you prefer.
You want me to try a motion for this one?
I'm asking Claudette. I don't know.
Or I'm asking Claudette too.
Oh.
I don't know. Or just do we leave the motioning until Monday?
Until Monday.
Just get us.
Oh, right.
So that's my thought.
I forgot. I'm sorry.
It's okay with me for Monday. But
Herb?
Just a reminder, Madam Chair, you had a number of potential requests to use the undesignated fund to offset some of the line items. Are those still live or not?
No.
Okay.
Not it. I'm saying I support John's argument about not taking any of those funds.
So I just, in the draft that you have so far of the warning, that would then you would take number 9 out of the consideration. I know there were others, but that was the one I had drafted up at that point. So,
yeah. So what's in the draft? Right. So that was taking the $10,000 from the undesignated fund for a cruiser.
Okay.
And then, so that is not supported. So you can pull that one.
Gotcha.
And then the only one that was on the draft for today's packet was the energy coordinator, I believe. So
yeah, the energy coordinator one is drafted into the warning right now, but the other two aren't.
And then there's one out, I'm going outside of the standard appropriations. There's one increase from the Lions to go from 3,000 to 3,500 for fireworks. And then all the others are their standard requests for appropriations. Roger looks like he has a look of consternation on his face.
Gosh. Well, there was also, I believe there was also the memo regarding the taxation of solar equipment from the Energy Committee. And so we could talk about that a little bit to see if it merits an article warning as well. So we could talk about that a little bit. It's a little more complicated, but we have lots of other people who can help me fumble it, or help me not fumble it.
Go ahead. And then I saw John had his hand up.
Oh, okay. So I think this summary was really about a policy. So it was really about the taxation of solar equipment, the decision to tax solar arrays and info. And so we could talk about the statute that allows the town to contract to stabilize taxes for solar equipment. So I think it goes back really to March 6, 2007, where there was an Article 9 at the time said that pursuant to 32 VSA 3845, shall the voters of the town of Norwich exempt from taxation that portion of a property's assessment which is devoted to qualifying alternative energy generation. This was voted yes and no. I guess my understanding from reading the memo is that it's under the valuation of solar equipment or solar plants. One of the bullet points is that you're allowed to make decisions on taxes based on whether or not the municipality has voted to exempt, or else there is a contract to stabilize the property's tax and pursuant to. And so this is basically seeking clarity on not only the decision voter, the 2007 decision, but also voters' decisions around the policy a little bit. So it would seek to clarify that further, and whether or not the board, at the direction of the voters, has the ability to enter into this contract in order to get the portion of the property assessment tax exempt. The overall spirit of it, from what I understand, is that it is just, the savings are not huge, but it is another extensive effort. It's part of an additional effort to support solar wherever possible in our community.
So was there a scale? There was a scale aspect to this too. Like it had to be above what, 150, let's say,
So
units, megawatts. It's pretty complicated. I'm not sure we could really make an informed decision
Okay.
on the fly. But
So John, before you speak, is there, and I'm just going to put the question out, is there a conflict of interest for you to be participating in this discussion based on your
No, this is a broad policy discussion. This doesn't have anything to do with any particular project. And I know I own and have no economic interest in any solar project within Norwich. I don't even have solar panels on my own house because my house doesn't sit well for them. So I don't believe that I do. I would only say that that yes, under a certain amount, which is what Mary was saying, they're automatically exempt. If I remember this correctly, Linda will correct me if I'm not, but I believe that under a certain threshold, they're automatically exempt. For the past several years, people have assumed that based on votes that the town did earlier, that all of the town was exempt from solar taxes generally. And there's been some question about that raised by the listers. And so it's just it's sort of putting the question new again. How do we feel about it? Do we want to make sure that there's no impediment to people who want to build solar in Norwich from a tax perspective? In which case we would basically vote to treat them like a nonprofit and encourage as much as all the other rules would allow. Or do we not want to do that? And I obviously would support not only solar, but any other carbon neutral, like if we did geothermal in our town, like we've been talking about, I would encourage that to be property tax exempt as well.
would we have any idea? Would we have any idea of the financial impact? Like just I mean, what is the value of a solar installation? Let's say it's a big one, about, you know, like that one on Route 5, that's mostly the King Arthur Flower.
It's community solar.
The community solar, yeah. I mean, I don't have any idea what is the actual value of that, and is it based on what it takes to install it, which probably is not that much, or is it based on the value of the energy produced, or what? And
Yeah, so a good go by is, so, and Vermont's a little bit confused about that, how they do this. So you could look at it in terms of the cost of that array, which is in Vermont, like right around $2.50 a watt, and as far as an initial price. You could look at it at the income that solar array will generate.
Over a certain number of years or something?
Yeah, well, the taxes come every year, right? So so you'd base the income on it every year. So in general, right, the tax is going to be highest in the first year, and then go down over time because the asset will be less over time, as opposed to your house, which should go generally up over time. But so there's a few different formulas that the tax authorities can use to calculate that.
And Cheryl could answer the question, since the arrays in question have dollar amounts that were attached to them. Cheryl, I don't know if you have that information right in front of you.
So Cheryl Lindbergh, yep, Board of Listers. I would like to speak to this very briefly. I am not, by the way, anywhere near an expert on solar. I will admit to that. So John's knowledge is helpful. I do know that at the state of Vermont level of interest, the inclusion of solar arrays at a certain kilowatt level are required to be in the grand list of every town in Vermont. And when we came across the fact that we had the possibility of a couple of solar arrays that met that minimum kilowatt limit, we reached out to other listers and our district advisor to advise us, and our own contract assessor was aware of the need to include these in a grand list, regardless of their eventual taxation or not. They are to be included. So those are now a quote parcel in our grand list at a value. That is a calculation that our district advisor assisted with. And we then therefore included those into the grand list. And there is a municipal tax only calculation done on those quote parcels. With that said, we did also consult with the town's attorney to review with us the 2007 article and received guidance on that, which was further supported by our contract assessor and the district advisor for Norwich. So we went forward feeling that we were accurate in what we were doing. We do not assess taxes. We do not decide any of that. We are merely doing our job, and appropriately so, to include those parcels, and we will continue to do that. It seems to me, if there's a concern in the state of Vermont with regard to doing this, that this effort should be at a state level to see if you can't change the minds of those that are asking us to include these in the grand lists, and not make Norwich, you know, the town that seems to want to always exclude, you know, a fair and equitable inclusion into the grand list for a solar array. Certainly, we're not taxing personal properties. We're not taxing non-profit parcels in any of this. This is strictly a for-profit scenario that is taking place, and certainly somebody could set up an array and have it be a nonprofit entity and do things very differently, but that is for someone to decide to do. I hope that's helpful, and that's how we got to where we are at. I would further say that, well, I'll make my personal comments as a non-lister afterwards.
Linda, you had a comment?
Yes, thank you. A couple points. So Mary asked about the cost, and in the memo, which is in your packet for last week, so I could give you the example. The formula is 5% of the assessed value of the equipment. So for the 150 kilowatt array, that turns out to be $766 a year. And for the 500 kilowatt array, it's $2,600 a year. So over 20 years, for the smaller one, that's 15,000. For the larger one, it's 52,000. So the amount of revenue in 1 year for both those projects is $3,366. So that's less than 0.1% of the town's annual property tax. So it's a modest amount. It's an extremely modest amount for the town, and it's a modest amount for a solar developer, but it's a way that we can be supportive of solar development. Cheryl's point about if the state wanted towns not to tax, the state would make a rule like that, but the state has given,
Right.
you know, the approach for local control. So the state has specifically offered the legislative avenue, the contract set up as a way to do it. And then there was a third point I wanted to make. And Cheryl was talking about these as profit making projects. And a key element that's highlighted in the memo from the Energy Committee is that, in fact, there's a very distinct parity issue for some of the projects, not all of them, but distinctly some of them, which is that we are recognized that John mentioned his house is not a good candidate for solar at his house. So the smaller array of the two that we're talking about, half of it has been purchased by individual people as their community solar. Off-site solar, it works the same way like from the utility in terms of getting the credits on your bill, etc. But they did it because they couldn't do it at home for various reasons. And so if they had done it at home, there would be no tax on the equipment. But yet, at this point, unless we take action, there's tax on the equipment. So there's a parity issue between on-site solar and off-site solar for households.
Well, and I could argue against that, but Rob, did you have a comment?
No, everybody froze, and so I was freaking out.
So how I differentiate this is that if the solar companies are a business, they are profit-making businesses. If they were to build a structure that had 4 walls and a roof, they would be taxed. It would be a parcel. And I see this as the same argument. They are profiting from the solar array. And I just see it in my mind as I don't see it as any different than a structure or any kind of parcel.
Could it be seen as a subsidy by the town? Since if it is not taxed, is that sort of a solar incentive that Norwich is making? Which maybe it shouldn't, but just saying.
So, and John has his hand up.
Yeah, so I think Mary, your point is a good one, and Linda's and Claudette, you have two sides of the same point, which is also good. I think a totally legitimate place to land on this would be on community solar, and say community solar is not going to be taxed in Norwich. If we are building an off-site location for folks who can't put solar on their roofs, a key part of this is not people like me whose houses are covered and have too much tree cover. It's renters, right?
Oh,
it's
right.
really hard to make solar available to renters. It's all kinds of difficult because of credit and stuff like that. So let's not add another thing that makes it harder to allow renters and folks like that to benefit from solar. If you're doing community solar, let's just have that treated. And I would say that's not a subsidy. That's recognizing a failure in the state government's part to not treat those type of users the same, right? So their situations are different. So in my view, it's so that the outcome is fair, right? And similar. I would also say that conversely, yeah, a purely for-profit solar that's benefiting another business, right? So you've just done, and so some of mine are like that, or actually mine actually benefits a nonprofit and a municipality, but whatever, it's not community solar really. So tax those and we'll factor that in. But all you're doing by adding that tax, you're generating some tax income for the town, and you're making solar more expensive for those individuals who happen to not be able to put the solar on their house. So I would think that would be a great middle ground to find.
Roger.
The only, Cheryl has her hand up, but the only thing I would add to what John is saying is, you know, I think the recommendation was for a future motion to ask voters to provide general authority to us, the board, to enter into contracts with developers of solar projects to set their municipal taxes as close to zero as possible. So we can, you know, in consultation with our attorneys, like set that amount, you know, ourselves too. But I think, you know, for the purpose of the article, I think we should ask for general authority. But, you know, which is just to say that, you know, this is policy ultimately, like, you know, like the reason why the 2007 is, you know, 2007 article is not enough is because there's other, you know, this is like, we have general authority in with the municipal vote, but there's other aspects to it. So this is really sort of speaking, this gives more clarity that this is a policy decision and that we as policymakers can enter into these contracts. So what John is saying about like amounts can come, I think can come later. We're seeking, I think the recommendation is that we seek permission from the voters to have the general authority to enter into these contracts to further clarify it. Linda Gray has her hand up. Cheryl was first, but I don't know if Linda Gray should go first because she might be clarifying something that I said.
That's fine with me.
Thank you, Cheryl. I just wanted to say that I don't know if you probably don't have any draft language for the article, but if possibly to clarify for voters as they understand what they're voting on, and you might wish to embed in that that your desire is to give the select board the authority to enter into contracts, and you might somehow figure out language to specify that it is to reduce taxes for community solar. That would restrict your authority, but that's your intention, and so you might as well be clear about it so that people who might have concerns, it's like, oh, why are we giving a profit-making company a break? They would understand that it's right. To create parity among households who have solar, the ones who have it on site, to be equal with in their tax treatment to the ones who have purchased solar off-site.
Right.
I'm way more comfortable with something like that than just a blanket, not have those panels assessed or for whatever. But Cheryl, go ahead.
Hi, Cheryl Lindbergh again. I had a couple thoughts, and there's been a lot of things that have been said to help me understand more. But I wonder, in these installations that we've had, am I incorrect that there are individuals that are not in Vermont who are profiting from the solar installation, such that it doesn't just help the Norwich, Vermont people? It was one of my questions about how these get set up and who the credits benefit and the whole installation's financial picture. But the other thing, to Linda's comment about, yeah, it's not a lot of money to the town of Norwich, but then it's not a lot of money to the organization, the business that's making the money from the solar array. So I think it looks, you can look at it both ways. It's the cost of doing business, and it helps the municipality who now has this in existence somewhere within the town boundaries.
So Linda, I'll take one more comment and then I'm moving us along because the language of the article is not even available for anybody to really review right now.
I just wanted to answer Cheryl's question about who benefits. So these are what you call net meter projects, meaning there has to be a local Green Mountain Power customer whose account is tied to the output of the solar panels. And in the case of community solar, that means that it is individual households who have invested in it just the same way they would have if they had invested in solar to be installed in their field or on their roof. So those people are most definitely Vermonters. In fact, most of them are Norwich, there would be a few, like I know of the community solar that's off Union Village Road, a few people live in Hartford, I think. But it is definitely all local people.
Okay.
So Claudette, would you entertain a motion to communicate our intention to enter into conversations with our attorney about this article warning?
Well, we only have until Monday. So right. The article needs to be presented in some kind of draft format by Friday to be included in a packet for Monday.
Right.
So, and if Herb feels he needs to consult with the attorney, then he can consult with the attorney, right?
Well, I want to communicate our intention for Herb to do that work, because if we don't have an intention, why would Herb do that work?
Yeah, so
I don't know.
It's pretty muddy. It's pretty muddy and last minute. I mean, I can see the value of trying to figure it out, but without a really solid article, it would be kind of article.
Maybe it's just not ready for this year's prime time.
But yeah. I don't personally think it's that complicated.
Yeah.
Well,
right?
John,
you could say, do the voters of Norwich support not taxing community solar in Norwich?
Oh, okay. Well, if it's
that's all you need to say. And then if you wanted to be super generous to project owners like me, you could say, we're not going to tax solar in general in Norwich, but that doesn't seem to me to be the sense of the group.
Okay.
But certainly you could say something very simple like the town of Norwich, to the extent allowable under state law, is not going to assess property tax on community solar arrays.
And community solar arrays that only that benefit the town of Norwich residents, or community solar arrays that benefit any GMP customer from North Hero to Bennington?
Yeah, we get a lot of flack for not doing anything to help anyone outside of our borders in Norwich. I would hope that we could extend this benefit at least to other Vermonters, if not to the stray person who wanders in from New Hampshire.
Linda, before I go to you, I'm just going to touch base with Rob and see what Rob is thinking.
So I'm curious as to whether or not I need to abstain, being a subscriber to the Union Village community solar project.
Probably because you would
I'd be biased.
actually,
Yeah.
This is a
I
policy
don't know.
decision.
There's very clear guidance on this, that when an elected official is voting on a tax matter, he need not recuse himself by simple dint of being a taxpayer.
Pam
But-
Smith also has her hand up. Claudette.
So no, I'm gonna, it's just like, Herb, do you feel you have enough direction from the board, sense of what where we're going with this?
I believe I have a sense of direction. I also know that I can rely on a couple people to help out with some language, whether it be Linda, John, et al. And then as I may need to consult with attorney to see if the language meets the muster for town meeting related stuff, I would do that.
Sounds good.
Because most instances, it's easy. You get a nonprofit organization and you ask the town if you want to make them tax exempt. So I think essentially what you're trying to do is to ask that. And so what I'm trying to do is come up with the similar language that relates to it with regard to your community solar, especially if it benefits Vermonters and Norwich in particular, and is within the bounds of the bounds of Vermont law. But
So
there
I
may-
don't think this needs a motion. And this is all going to be decided on Monday or finalized on Monday. So Pam, unless there is some, I'll allow your comment, but I'm going to limit it, I suppose I should say.
Thank you. Pam Smith, 1445 New Boston Road. I thought the town clerk was very clear that the deadline for articles to be submitted was the 14th. Was I mistaken?
Tomorrow.
That's tomorrow, right? So unless the board approves the motion or they have a motion by tomorrow at 4:30, would it even be one that could be considered for this year's town warrant?
Yeah.
There's a difference between having the motion submitted to the town clerk versus the time that the board needs to finalize the warrant. So that allowed us to go to Monday to to discuss approving the warrant
Okay. All
with
right,
the
thank you.
articles. So
Thanks for,
the general public needs to get any proposed articles to Bonnie by Thursday. Yes.
okay, thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome.
Bonnie Monday has her hand up, Claudette. I'm just the messenger of
Unless I'm, okay, Bonnie, clarify if I'm wrong, but
you have to,
go ahead.
Yeah, no, the select board can put this on by their own means. They can do it with or without a petition. A petition would mean I would have to have it. And if they did have 5% of the voters, you would have to essentially put it on the warning, but you do have the ability to put this on by yourselves.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Without a petition.
Right. Okay. So my one question to ask the rest of the board is if we want an article that has the town vote on or give us some understanding about whether or not they want to invest more money in the Beaver Meadow scoping or Beaver Meadow sidewalk. We had less than a quarter of the checklist participate in any of the discussion. So it's a thought. We did it with the rapid lights, the blinking lights, prior to deciding whether or not to to spend any more money. So,
I think it's a good idea. I mean, I think there's strong neighborhood support for the scoping study, but not perhaps townwide. Or not, you know,
right, we don't,
you wouldn't know unless you put it on there.
right.
When is it slated in the the capital plan that it's not the not approved capital plan? Is it soon? It's sooner than.
Well, we have the Dubois and King is back on the 27th to present the final report.
Yes.
There was a proposed $20,000 additional engineering work. I don't know. I looked at the plan. I don't know what the timelines are. I don't know any of that off the top of my head.
So I ask because obviously any request like this in a time like this is like a time like this informs the answer, right? So I feel, so that's the only reason I say that, because if it's, I would like to not be in a pandemic year to ask people's advice on expanding our capital projects, if that makes sense. I feel like this year will condition that thinking. That being said, it's hubris to think that the pandemic will only be 1 year. So that's the only thing I wanted to contribute, that I think, to ask this year of all years would be unfair to the project. That's all.
Right. But then by not asking, it's kind of implied that it will continue, which is what I believe the neighborhood people or the people who are in support of this project truly expect to have happen. So, Herb?
Going along, there's never been a foregone conclusion that just because the study's being done and completed, it would move us to the next phase. Basically, we're looking at it as kind of a three-phase approach, where then we would apply for some additional money to move forward, if you opted to move forward with it, to under the same grant program, to be able to do the final engineering and design and right-of-way acquisition as may be necessary, and then thereafter a follow-up to do some construction. So that's why the next phase is the engineering analysis. But even the neighbors that are very supportive of this have been told right along the way that we're at a juncture of, we've got the scoping report done. There's going to have to be some additional decision made to move it to the next phase. So I just want to make sure that that's understood, that just because you did the scoping analysis, there was no foregone conclusion that we'd be moving to construction.
Yeah, I have, but you also then said if the board approves. So I guess from the listserv postings and from sitting in on the project meetings, I do not see the people that are strong proponents of this hearing that it's not going to continue, because I just don't hear that.
That was never, so they know that there is a decision that the select board has to make now that the scoping analysis is finishing up, to decide to move forward for the next adventure, if there's going to be one. I mean, honestly,
I agree.
I'm a little, I'm honestly surprised during the budget meetings that there hasn't, that Peter hasn't been here to lend support for moving forward to the next step. But that they've always known that it's coming to the select board, and that there's another decision that has to be made. So if you opt to, that's not to say that maybe this year you decide not to do it. That doesn't mean the scoping analysis goes away. There may be a future select board or a future time frame that someone says, okay, now it's appropriate to do the next phase of that particular project.
I just want, Claudette, I just want the advice from the town to not be so conditioned on the current situation. Like it's never a bad idea to be advised. And I think this is something that we could benefit from having advice on. And I appreciate you in particular for talking about the flashing lights being a request. I was shocked by the results of that. That being said, I think that I'll always wonder, if it was the true, I feel like it's just such an it's unfair to ask this year. That's all.
Rob, any thoughts?
No, I think I like Roger's argument that it's we wouldn't get a true reading if we push it forward this year.
Mary?
Even though I'm pro sidewalk. So.
I don't think I like Roger's reasoning about the COVID. So I would be inclined not to have it on as an article.
Okay. Any other proposals from the board? If not, then I'm moving us along to the open meeting law Land Management Council request for funding. Is there a motion to approve the bond reimbursement expenditure of $1,000 as approved by the Land Management Council for forestry services provided by Twin State Forestry LLC?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Any discussion? We'll vote. John?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Next is the town manager's report. It was in the packet. Are there any select board questions, comments?
I think there was some, Roger had a question about the air quality assessment.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, I would just like to hear next steps and what have we learned, what have we learned from this, and what are we motivated to do with the information?
So a lot of the information was information that we already knew with regard to adherence to CDC guidelines, the health department, all that sort of stuff with regard to the sanitary aspect of things dealing in a COVID environment. That's a lot of credit goes to Bree on that because she has been working closely with the state on those things. So, but the two of them consulted back and forth. So that's from the standpoint of the cleanliness aspect of things, we're on target with regard to that. With concerns to COVID and building for some rec programs in the gym from that standpoint, generally speaking, the consultant has said, don't do that because even just unless you have the windows all open up, you can't do that because they don't really have the proper ventilation to deal with it. So you could do that, but having all the windows open up in the middle of December is not really the highlight of anybody's idea to deal with stuff. He did say that we could do some stuff, but in the absence of having some windows open, having the installation of some air purifiers throughout, which I still would have to figure out what kind of purifiers I would have to get for the size of the gym that we have with it. There's a lot of cubic inches that we would have to move around. In addition, in looking at some other areas besides the gym there with regard to our downstairs situation, because we've had a little bit of a leakage with certain things, he suggested that we look at some possibility of some mold remediation, at least being tested to see if there's mold that we have, because some of the units down there do leak periodically. And so the concern is that because there's carpeting down there, that maybe there's some saturation that's occurred. So he does suggest doing a little bit of testing to see if there's mold stuff that we have to deal with. He also suggested well, and because we're in Vermont, is that we've probably put some radon testers down there. I don't know if in the past that we've tested the building for radon, but those things usually you can get pretty free, if not free, from the health department to deal with that. There are a couple suggestions that I think he talks about with regard to overall just general air quality stuff with different codes, but there's nothing that I would say that popped up that said, you know, this employee can't be in this office anymore because of certain air quality codes. Clearly, he would love to see, like we talked about with Tracy Hall, that if you're going to go in and open something up to put in, like we talked about with the energy system, while you got all the walls opened up, it makes sense to put in, to update the HVAC system to bring it to code. But there's nothing that is really of a huge danger at this point from that. Going back to COVID, again, he's basically saying continue to keep the building closed to for stuff. And just as a sidebar to that, the only thing that I'm have opened the building up for is to allow the Red Cross to come in and do blood donations. I see that as an essential service. And then we'll have the, I continue to talk with Bonnie, but it looks like we'll have some indoor polls for town meeting. And I am allowing the fire district to do their annual meeting to get their 20 votes or whatever it is in here. It'll be over on the stage and all done according to separation and number of people and all that. So those are those sort of essential services that I let in, but nothing else is nothing else is really going in there other than staff and an occasional walk around by a family that needs to exercise their special needs child. It was not an extensive report, but the takeaway was that there's some testing we could do, keep your building closed. But there was not, what came out of it was not a big scare that because we didn't pass Tracy Hall that we have to go and put $1 million in the budget to go put in a new HVA system.
Okay. Any other questions from board members on the report? Seeing none. Our next item, we have 2 executive sessions to go through.
Can we deal with Rod's first so he can go home? Or turn
He is
around.
home.
Somewhere else once you enter executive.
That's fine. If any objection to doing the second executive session first?
No.
Is anybody willing to make a motion?
I muted Mary because she was talking in the background. So you have to unmute Mary, sorry.
All right, Roger. I'm willing to make that motion.
Please go ahead.
Okay. And this is number 11, I believe.
Yeah.
I move to make a finding that premature public knowledge of the select board's position relative to civil litigation would place the town at a substantial disadvantage.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Mary, seconded by Rob. We'll vote. John?
Aye.
Roger?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Second part of that?
I move to enter executive session under 1 VSA section 313A 1E, pending or probable civil litigation or prosecution to which the public body is or may be a party, to discuss a litigation issue involving zoning fees, and to include the town manager and the town zoning administrator.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Mary, seconded by Rob. We'll go to a vote. John?
Aye.
Roger?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So for the members of the public, actually, Herb, we don't expect any action or public action to come out of these executive sessions? That's a question.
There may be direction that you would give the zoning administrator, so possible action potentially.
Okay. So Roger's going to put everybody in a waiting room, and we'll be back.
Miranda, you can go away because I can.
Oh.
No, it's all right. I'll text her.
Okay. Who's left? Linda. Okay, mute. We're back.
Okay, is there a motion to end public session?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We'll roll call. John?
Aye.
Roger?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
And Claudette's a yes. So back in public at 9:54. And the board just wants to make a statement that we agree with the zoning administrator on the resolution to the issue about zoning fees. Does that cover it, Herb? Okay. So we have another executive session. We're almost done, guys. I know it feels like midnight and not
It
10
does.
o'clock.
So,
Go ahead, Mary.
all right. I move to make a finding that premature public knowledge of the select board's position relative to civil litigation would place the town at a substantial disadvantage.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Mary, seconded by Rob. We'll take a vote. John?
Aye.
Roger?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
And Claudette's a yes. Second
Okay.
part of that?
Part two. I move to enter executive session under 1 VSA, section 313A1E, pending or probable civil litigation or prosecution to which the public body is or may be a party, to discuss a litigation issue involving open meeting law, and to include the town manager and or town legal counsel.
Is there a second?
Second.
Oh,
Seconded, motion made by Mary, seconded by John. We'll vote. John?
Aye.
Roger?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Rob?
yes.
Claudette's a yes. So back into executive at 9:56. Is there a motion to end a public session?
So moved.
Is there a second? A
Second.
motion made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Gonna roll call. John? Mr. Langus.
Aye.
Sorry. Roger?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
And Claudette's a yes. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Motion made by, oh, sorry, public session at 10:29, adjourn.
Yep.
Motion made by Rob. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mary. Roll call. John?
Here, here.
Roger?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Nice
you.
job on the budget, guys. I think we got to
Yeah.
a good place.
Good.
Yeah, it'll be, I mean, I'm going to be very interested in how
Reactions.
the people decide, especially with the hit that they're going to have to contemplate on the school side.
Yep.
That's,
It's ugly.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's, well, you don't know part, yeah, unless you watch the meeting, there's some there's a bond, there's a separate bond on top of the budget itself.
Uh-oh.
So,
Very, very well-deserved bond, I might add.
yeah, it's for IT work, but it's not an insignificant chunk of change, that's for
Right.
sure.
Good night, everyone.
Yeah, right.
Oh, and there's also, you really should watch the meeting because there's whether or not we should, there's a motion by Dresden to change the article. We can't, this is information for you guys only.
Yeah.
Watch the meeting, it's all public record.
Yeah.
Information to alter the articles of agreement to change how they fund the tuition students from the 6th grade in Hanover to Dresden. But as part of that, the push from the Hanover Finance Committee is to somehow make Norwich pay for the Richmond Middle School 6th grade wing, or somehow prorate.
Trade-off kind of thing?
Prorate, if Norwich were to ever send their kids to Richmond, their 6th graders to Richmond, for somehow to be able to prorate how they want us to essentially cover the 20 years that the Hanover voters paid a bond for the Richmond 6th grade annex.
Yeah, because it was built for their 6th grade only.
So it's
because they're the only ones that send their 6th graders there. We don't send our 6th graders.
Well, if in the,
That's right.
But to change the articles of agreement in the future, it's not outside the realm of possibility that we would send our 6th graders there. So, but
sure, if we suddenly have people start moving here again, we might fill up our school with.
Well, and the other piece is the 6th grade wing can't accommodate it right now with how they change their teaching. It's a very interesting.
I'm going to choose not to worry about that issue tonight.
Don't worry about that issue, but worry about the bond in the school. Good night.
I'll provide PSA to everyone to tune in to the school budget here in the remaining minutes of our adjourned select board meeting.
Okay. Bye, everybody. Thank you.